All right. Good morning. Happy Friday, everyone. Um, I know I've had a busy week, so I'm definitely looking forward to the weekend. And it's my birthday. So I am super excited to be here with you today. It is day two of the first ever Vaughn Virtual Real Estate Conference. And we are super excited, obviously, to be here. Thank you all for joining us. And it is being hosted by the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce in partnership with the city of Vaughan. The city is ripe for growth, and that's why the city of Vaughan has launched the Growth with Vaughan, the city's newest partnership program, offering local businesses an opportunity to sponsor a city flower bed across the city. Personally, just off script, we're actually looking to get involved with the city on this initiative at the Millennials Choice Group of Companies. So it's a great initiative. So recognizing the challenges our 19,000 businesses are facing due to the pandemic, and 80% of those businesses are actually small businesses, this program offers a targeted marketing solution and community investment opportunity at a low cost for local businesses. So Grow with Vaughan is a great way to build your brand awareness amongst local residents, I should say, with 50 flower beds in high traffic locations across the city available for sponsorship. Through a customized e-commerce website, businesses can now browse online using an interactive map, select and purchase your preferred flower bed, and automatically receive turnkey benefits. All packages include the design and fabrication of one sign for 12 months in the sponsored flower bed, as well as hyperlinked logo recognition on the dedicated Grow with Vaughan website. This is a unique partnership opportunity that not only contributes to the beautification of many Vaughan neighborhoods, fostering civic pride, but also creates positive association amongst residents with your business. So to get involved, visit the Grow with Vaughan website at www.vaughan.ca/corporate sponsorships. And I hope someone from our team can just post that link in our chat. So for those tuning in for the first time, welcome. We've had a fantastic group of speakers yesterday in day one, and some of those speakers have returned for day two. And I've actually I got my Amazon Basics notepad, and I've just been taking notes. So just a quick recap. We had remarks from our mayor, the mayor of Vaughan, the Honorable Mauricio Bevilacqua, and it's always great to hear from him, as well as the president of the Vaughan Chamber, my good friend Brian Schiffman. And together with those two people, whenever they come out and speak, I'm always listening because they have such a imagination for the future of Vaughan, and you could tell that they're very passionate. And I think you get into that space within the city of Vaughan in this case, because you truly are passionate about not only the city but about the residents of Vaughan. We started the day off strong. We had Mark Christianbaum, the VP of Sales at Colliers. And I made some notes because I'm not an industrial guy. Most of my business, I should say commercial guy, most of my business is residential. So this was a great learning experience for me. The industrial real estate market is doing strong. There's less than 1% vacancy rate. And there's a lot of factors that attribute to that. We have big companies like Amazon expanding their operations here in Vaughan, and also Walmart with their distribution centers. Also, our unemployment rate in Vaughan is pretty established, so it's less than 6%, 5.83% to be exact. Now, obviously with COVID, office space has taken a hit, and you're getting these long-term tenants that are now subleasing the market, which was what Mark was saying, and that's flooding the market with supply, obviously resulting in lower rents, and there's a saturation of supply, so that's affecting the overall office market. As an aside, I'm very hopeful. We've made an investment in office space earlier this year in May, with a little bit of a twist on that to provide better mental health support for our staff, and also creating an open concept environment and work area. So that was Mark Christianbaum, and he's very hopeful about the future of the commercial real estate market. We followed up with Fausto Filippetto, the manager of long range planning, and he expressed how the city of Vaughan is reviewing their official plan. And what I found really cool about this is they're looking at it from a holistic view. And I wasn't too informed about this, so it was great having Fausto on. And what do I mean by holistic view is they're now looking at what they did years ago and what was put in place. And now they're looking at it from a standpoint of what do we need to actually do now and change and adapt with the times and the changing market and demographic and all of that. So they're looking at it from a holistic view. He gave us a little bit of insight as to what some of the ideas that are being talked about. So things like bridging the gap and creating middle housing, also plexes, so possibly the emergence of duplexes, triplexes, co-housing, which is pretty cool. Also, the obviously mixed use communities, that's a very hot topic right now, and creating live work units more commonly in Vaughan. We don't see that too often, which is nice. We're happy to have Jason Mercer on today, and he's the chief market analyst at TREB, and we're obviously gonna hear from him today. But we were talking about the increase in supply in the Toronto condo market, how areas outside of Toronto, like Vaughan, are actually still growing amongst this whole pandemic. And we're very happy to have him and Lisa Patel here. I'm going to introduce both of them to you shortly. We followed that up with Stephen Schmid from the City of Vaughan. He's the Economic Development Coordinator, and hopefully someone from our team can also post this link. It's vaughanbusiness.ca/vacant land. So the City of Vaughan has worked very hard in creating this new resource for business owners, for developers, for builders. If you're on this call, you're planning on building a project and you want to search up vacant land. So basically it's a vacant land registry, and he showed us a demo of this. And it's pretty cool because you can narrow down the criteria for what it is that you're looking for, including things like zoning. And that's something that they're making available. It's free for us to use. So I encourage everybody to use it. It was the first time I heard about it. So I'm definitely going to be sharing it with some of the developers I work with. And, towards the end, we had a great, I guess you could say, panel discussion, fireside chat with Mary Grace Tatangelo and Vivian Reese, two very hungry, very dominant entrepreneurs in the City of Vaughan. So Mary Grace Tatangelo is a mortgage agent with Pillrock Mortgages, the Mortgage Center, and Vivian Reese is the broker of record and owner of Royal LePage Your Community Realty. And I actually take that back. I shouldn't just say City of Vaughan. Their businesses are obviously, they exist outside of Vaughan, but they are dedicated Vaughan residents, and we really appreciate them. We talked about what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. We talked about things like, because of COVID, we've had to embrace technology. And, in the real estate side of things, we've been using e-signatures, I believe, since 2016. On the mortgage side of things, it's been a little bit lagged, and trying to use e-signatures was like pulling teeth. But now COVID accelerated that. Lenders embraced it. So we were talking about that. We were talking about how, open houses were being done virtually, are still being done virtually. We're talking about 3D virtual tours, which is nice, where clients can walk through the property without actually having to physically go there and compromise anybody's health. We're also talking about how to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to adapt to the changing environment. And that was really, really interesting, that conversation. Also about bringing more value to your clients. So during COVID, one of the things that was mentioned was just calling your clients and just checking in, not only for moral support, but also finances is a very sensitive area. And you really have to have that rapport with the client so that they could come out and be very open and talk to you about it. So that was really, really cool. And just being there for your client no matter what. So that was day one, people. And we have most of these speakers coming back today, and we have a bunch of new speakers, and I am super pumped. So let's get right into it. We have some housekeeping items. So this event is being recorded and will be made available post-conference. There is a Q&A feature. It's at the bottom of your screen. It's indicated by Q&A, and you can access that anytime you'd like. So whoever's watching, if you have a question for the speakers, the best way to do that or ask your question is to post it in the Q&A, and we're going to do our best to get to that question. If questions that are submitted are relevant to you, you can upvote the question. So you can click on the thumbs up, and we'll know that that's a very popular question to ask. So following each keynote and panel discussion, we will have 10 minutes allocated for Q&A, at which point we will try to answer as many as possible. I am Matthew Ablican. I am your host today from the Millennials Choice Group of companies. We've been in Vaughan for 21 years, and we're super excited to see what the future of Vaughan holds. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lisa Patel, President of the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, which we are happy to be a part of. Lisa Patel is a salesperson with Royal LePage Signature Realty. She's an entrepreneur and a strong community leader. Ms. Patel has served with many organizations and groups and is presently a mentor of the University of Information and Technology, working with students in their career initiatives. That's an awesome, awesome program. She has also been a mentor for the Canadian Youth Business Foundation, now known as Futurepreneur Canada, for approximately 15 years, working with young entrepreneurs. She has served several other organizations, including a director of Board of AppBot, Board of Trade, a past director of the Toronto Infinity, two-star Standard Condominium Corporation number 1928. Lisa's brand has been included by McGraw-Hill in an educational textbook and studied by business professionals and entrepreneurs. Her brand was recognized by Andrews Pone, author of Attract, Power Up Your One-of-a-Kind Personal Brand for brand strength and consistency. In 2009, Ryerson University recognized Lisa as top 30 under 30. Lisa Patel was also a former host for a television show with Rogers TV, A Greener Durham. She was a recipient of the Queen's Jubilee Medal along with Ontario Service Awards for her dedication to community work. Lisa shares her time with others and speaks on topics of entrepreneurship, women in business, metaphysical teachings, breaking through barriers, and mindset. As a TREB president, Ms. Patel aims to enhance the image and value of realtors and safeguard the ownership, accuracy, and integrity of the MLS system. She has served as a member of the TREB Fest Task Force, chair of the Young Professionals Network Committee, vice chair of Member Services, director of Ontario Realtors Care Foundation, and a member of the executive committee. Ms. Patel is currently the chair of the Women in Real Estate Task Force, Realtor Quest, and 100-year anniversary celebration task force and executive committee. Lisa, we're very happy to have you. It's all yours.
Thank you, Matthew. What a lovely introduction. Good morning, everyone. Grab your Java and your water and get ready for an exciting presentation. My name is Lisa Patel, and I am the president of the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. Thank you for inviting us, and we are thrilled to be part of the city's first virtual real estate conference. This year, we have a milestone. That's right. Happy anniversary, for a cheerful toast and fill it. Happy anniversary, but be careful you. TREB is celebrating 100 years. That's right, 100 years of real estate on November 29th. If it wasn't for a small group of real estate brokers who had the vision to create the real estate board, we wouldn't be here today. Long before anyone else, they believed in protecting homeownership, advocating for homeowners, and even started real estate training courses. Among our recent accomplishments, the Ontario government has passed the new Trust in Real Estate Services Act, which includes allowing realtors to form personal real estate service acts, which includes allowing realtors to form personal real estate corporations, something that TREB has lobbied for since 2005. This achievement comes as a result of years of lobbying by TREB and is a testament to the collective strength of the realtor voice. Fast forward today, TREB has become Canada's largest real estate board with over 57,000 realtors throughout the Greater Toronto Area, including in the lovely and beautiful city of Vaughan. To help us commemorate our anniversary, we have asked political dignitaries and industry partners to share in our celebration. I would like to personally thank Vaughan Mayor Maurizio Bevilacqua and President and CEO of Vaughan Chamber of Commerce, Brian Schiffman, for their warm and heartfelt greetings, thank you, which we have shared with our membership. If you haven't seen these videos, I urge you to check them out by logging onto our website, treb100.ca. That's TRREB100.ca, and read some fascinating stories from our members. Those stories make me proud to be president of an organization that has become the most trusted and reliable source of real estate and housing market insights, not only for our members and elected officials, but for the public at large. Without further ado, it is with great pleasure to introduce TREB's one and only Chief Market Analyst, Jason Mercer, who will share an economic overview and latest market trends. Jason, on to you.
Thanks very much, Lisa. Appreciate the introduction. And Matthew, happy birthday and great introduction. And really enjoyed yesterday's conference and happy to build on it today as well. So what I'll do now is I'll share my screen and we can get right into the presentation. Just bear with me here.
And while Jason gets that set up, I just want to remind everybody that the Vaughan Business Achievement Awards will be taking place next Wednesday, November 18th. We have over, I believe, team, we have over 450 tickets sold. I'm going to be there. My team's going to be there. Make sure you're there. I'm talking to you. Jason, sorry, back to you.
Okay, now hopefully you could see my screen. Maybe Matthew, you could confirm for me.
You got it. We could see it.
Okay, excellent. So what I want to take you through over the next, say, 10 minutes or so, and then leave some time for questions, because I really thought the question period in yesterday's session was great, and it, obviously gives people the opportunity to drill down, but it also gives me an opportunity to sort of see what people are thinking about on the ground with regard to real estate and their businesses more broadly. But jumping right in, the first thing I want to sort of look at is just the COVID-19 cases and timeline, because it's obviously through that lens that we're really thinking about how growth in the overall regional economy has progressed, and obviously how that's filtered down into the real estate market in particular. And it's been quite an ebb and a flow over the better part of the last year, since the midway through March. We had declared the initial state of emergency, obviously, and then moved through the various phases of COVID-19 as the recommended and required public health measures were applied and then loosened as we moved through the summer. And obviously now we're moving through a period where we've seen a resurgence in cases and have seen stricter measures come back into place with regard to public health guidelines. And so again, this is sort of the lens that we're looking at the market through, looking at the overall economy through. And I think, by and large, the Canadian economy, and drilling down into Ontario and the GTA, adapted quite quickly and quite well to changes in the COVID-19 situation and how that fed into the economy. Matthew mentioned earlier about the flexibility that came about in the real estate and lending space with regard to virtual showings, with regard to expanded use of e-signatures and similar platforms. And so obviously that is representative of not only the innovation within the real estate sector, the lending sector, but I think it also represents a broader innovation that came into place, and we were able to see a lot of businesses move from the bricks and mortar office to the home office and carry on their business. And so much so that when you think about the path of equity markets, the path of stock markets over the better part of the last year, it really does represent a lot of confidence that businesses and certainly people who follow equity markets have in growth as we move forward. Because obviously we see to the left of this chart that initial valuations of public companies dropped off quite dramatically, both in Canada, this is the TSX, but if we were to look at the Dow or the S&P, a similar trend. By the time we reached the summer, and certainly where we are today, we've clawed back a lot of that initial dip. And don't forget, when we're talking about equity valuations, we're talking about, what the feeling is for future growth across different sectors of the economy. And so the fact that we've, clawed back a lot of the losses that we saw in the spring, and we're, hopefully approaching, the levels that we were at back in February, that represents quite a bit of confidence in the economy moving forward. And we did see a substantial rebound in overall economic growth in Canada. This is just looking at GDP on a monthly basis, and obviously a very steep drop off. And we can't, underpin that, more strongly. That if we look back to the first and second quarters of 2020, there's an initial steep drop off in economic growth, and that was sort of the period where businesses across the spectrum were sort of figuring out how they are going to conduct business within the COVID period. But those businesses that were able to make that move from the bricks and mortar office to the home office, or adapt to the various social distancing and other public health guidelines, started to get back onto the growth track fairly quickly. And so while we had an extremely steep drop off in the spring, as we moved through the summer and early fall, we started to see economic growth resume again. Obviously, we're not back to levels that we'd seen, say, in January and February, because there still are sectors of the economy, because of public health concerns, because of restrictions surrounding those concerns, haven't got back to full capacity. But definitely, things have been looking a lot better than where we were in the early spring. And I think the growth that we've seen in GDP, reflects the feeling for future growth that we've seen in equity markets as well. And that renewed growth has, also been picked up in the labor market, which makes a lot of sense. Most businesses rely heavily upon skilled workers to produce the goods and services that they're selling both in Canada and abroad. And so as the economy started to pick up, it makes sense that initially some people who had moved into unemployment temporarily started to get back into the labor market and get back into the market quite quickly, to the point where we had seen jobs drop to levels that we hadn't seen since 2009, 2010. And as of the end of October, we're seeing employment levels back to where we were, say, midway through 2018. So that's a extremely quick rebound, a V-shaped rebound to date. Obviously, we'll see how things unfold over the next few months. We're seeing stricter regulations come back into place, but it's important to note that last data point on this chart does represent October, and Statistics Canada made a point in their latest release to say that that survey was undertaken as stricter measures were coming into place. So to a certain degree, the fact that we continue to see growth in October as we were seeing stricter guidelines in place was it's certainly a positive sign. It's not surprising then that while as we started to see people move back into the employed ranks, we started to see the unemployment rate trend lower as well. Still a ways to go, certainly, to the tightest labor market conditions we've seen in generations, and that we were experiencing at the beginning of this year. But certainly a vast improvement, compared to the unemployment rate that we were seeing back in March and April. And so again, this gets back to confidence, both consumer confidence, people's ability to gain and retain employment, and obviously that feeds through into the purchase of goods and services. It also speaks to business confidence. If you're bringing people back into the fold, in terms of employment, it means that you're confident that your book of business is going to increase as we move forward. Just a final note on the labor market, and this comes from Indeed, and they update this on a monthly basis, and it just looks at new job postings. And over the last 3 weeks or so, we've actually seen the number of new job postings move above where we were in just before the COVID period began. So where we were basically at the end of February and the first couple of weeks of March. And again, that speaks to business confidence as they look forward, because they're looking to bring on new employees because they're anticipating growth. So I want to start drilling into the housing market in a little bit more detail. And certainly, if you think about when people are confident to make a large ticket purchase. For most households, the largest purchase they'll make in their lifetimes. Obviously, they need to be confident in their position in the labor market, because you require an income to purchase a house. The majority of people are purchasing a home through the use of a mortgage. So you have to have that ability to make those payments on a regular basis over the long term. But that speaks to the existing labor market. The other driver, obviously, of the housing market and growth in the housing market moving forward is population growth. And so if you continue to see the number of households increase over time, then obviously the demand for residential real estate will continue to climb, and we'll see increased building activity and all the positive spin-offs that come from that. So as we moved into the COVID-19 period, obviously we saw immigration into Ontario and into Canada drop off dramatically. With borders closed and worldwide travel taking a serious dip. But it's interesting to note that as the federal government is thinking towards recovery over the next 2 to 3 years, we've seen an upward adjustment to immigration targets for Canada, where over the next 3 years, each of the next 3 years, we'll see over 400,000 newcomers to Canada arriving, and many of them will arrive in the Greater Toronto Area. The Greater Toronto Area has been Canada's single greatest beneficiary of immigration over time, and obviously that's benefited our housing markets in different parts of the GTA immensely. So we've seen a rebound in economic fortunes in terms of the labor market, in terms of GDP. We should anticipate moving forward that we'll see population growth resume quite strongly in the GTA. The final piece of the puzzle when we're thinking about purchasing a home is the cost of money, the mortgage rates. And thinking about short-term rates, that's driven by the decisions made by the Bank of Canada, and certainly right now we're seeing their target for the overnight lending rate, their policy rate, if you will, at the record lows that we hadn't seen since 2009, 2010. And rates were lowered quite dramatically by the Bank of Canada. And we expect them to remain at these low levels as we move through 2021 to help, continue to bootstrap the economy, to induce spending both on the part of consumers and businesses. And obviously that feeds through into the longer term mortgage market as well, where, a lot of realtors clients right now are able to take on, a 5-year mortgage at, below 2%. So certainly whether we're talking about shorter term rates or whether we're talking about longer term borrowing costs, that's really improved from a payment affordability perspective since early to mid spring. And so obviously that's prompted a lot of people who had initially moved to the sidelines thinking about purchasing a home. We've seen them move back into the market very strongly as we've moved through the summer and now into the fall. And that's what these charts point out. These are sales and new listings on a monthly basis for the last few years. But really what we see on the right-hand side of the chart, not surprisingly, there was an initial drop-off both in sales and listings as we saw a certain degree of uncertainty as a result of the initial phases of COVID-19. But again, as we started to see many sectors of the economy adapt to working from home and what have you, we started to see growth come back. We started to see increased consumer confidence that people were going to be able to retain their employment and continue to see income coming in, and at the same time they're able to benefit from record low borrowing costs. So not surprisingly, as we moved through the summer, we saw a V-shaped recovery come online, both in terms of sales, the blue line. We also saw listings come back to a great degree as well. We'll talk a little bit more about listings in a moment. That orange line really spiked up, and that's where you're seeing a bit of a dichotomy in the marketplace, where market conditions actually remain quite tight still for single family homes, detached, semis, and townhomes, where the supply of listings actually remains quite tight. But at the same time, we've seen more investor listing of condominium apartments, both in the city of Toronto and other parts of the GTA. So if you think about, market conditions and sort of what drives price growth is that relationship between demand and supply. And so one way of looking at this is months of inventory, basically assuming or saying that if we didn't see any more listings come into the market and we maintain the existing level of sales, how long would it take to deplete all of the standing inventory of active listings? And, right now that's, hovering, below 2 months. And the GTA market has been quite tight over the last number of years. But certainly after a brief spike in inventory levels in the early spring with the initial onset of COVID, we've really seen market conditions drop back to where we were in the latter half of 2019 and first couple months of 2020. And so what this means is there is a lot of competition between buyers in the marketplace right now. And when you see a lot of competition between buyers, that serves to exert upward pressure on pricing. And that's particularly the case again in that single family market where we are still suffering in a lot of neighborhoods from a lack of inventory, but a lot of competition between buyers. And so in a lot of cases we're seeing double-digit price growth for single semis and towns in a lot of neighborhoods throughout the GTA, including York and Vaughan. So then if you look at price, this displays the average price over the last few years, and certainly since the recovery that took hold in the housing market in the summer and early fall, we've actually seen the average selling price move above the previous record peak that we saw back at the beginning of 2017. And that just gets back to how tight market conditions got as we moved through the summer, particularly on the low-rise segments of the market. And we can drill down into York as well, and I think that this chart sort of lays out quite nicely, that sort of difference between the single-family side of the market and the condominium apartment side of the market. So, whereas sales are up extremely strongly on a year-over-year basis for detached homes, 14.6%. Sales are up 9% for semis, 11% for townhomes. We've actually seen a bit of a dip in that condominium apartment segment. Similarly, if you look at, or conversely, if you look at new listings, you've actually seen on a year-over-year basis, the listings drop off in York region for detached, semi-detached, and townhomes, while you've seen listings increase for condos. So, essentially tightening market conditions across the board in the low-rise segments, detached, semis, and townhomes. Buyers certainly benefiting from more inventory in the condominium apartment market over the last few months. Which has allowed for a little bit more aggressive offers in that segment. But regardless of whether you're talking about the low-rise segments like detached, semis, or townhomes, you're seeing double-digit price growth there as market conditions have tightened up. But in the York region in particular, the condo market has held up quite well. Also seeing 10% price growth year to date compared to the same period of time last year. So, that finishes sort of the official component of my presentation, looking at how the underlying drivers and some key housing market stats have unfolded over the last few months. So I'll turn it back over to Matthew if you have some questions or the audience has some questions. Thanks very much.
Absolutely, thank you. And that was super informative and I think very enlightening. And I see some really, really good things in our future. So that's I'm really excited about that. So just a reminder to everybody, if you have any specific questions for Jason or for any of our speakers, just use the Q&A feature at the bottom and submit those. So Jason, we've got some questions for you.
Sure.
So with regards to, you touched on mortgage deferrals. So how do you think that's been impacting our current climate? And now that it's coming to an end, do you see the prospect of a lot of defaults and possibly people just trying to liquidate their property very quickly?
See, I mean, from my perspective, if you think about, the confidence that we've seen in the housing market over the last few months, I think, a lot of households initially may have taken advantage of a mortgage deferral because it offered more flexibility in the initial period of COVID. I mean, it was uncertain times, so people didn't necessarily know, how things were going to unfold with their employment. But we saw a lot of businesses were quite flexible, and so while a lot of those deferrals have come to an end, it's not clear to me that with those ending that we've seen a strong correlation with an uptick in defaults. In fact, the other day in the newspaper, both and also on television, there's a discussion that some lenders were actually dialing back some of the funds that have been put aside for bad debt and what have you, and we're seeing that actually add to the bottom line of some of these lenders. And so that suggests to me that they're not seeing the type of defaults that initially had been discussed as we move through the spring and summer and approach the end of some of those deferrals. And so I think that's a good sign. Number one, I mean, people are still out there buying. So existing homeowners that are trading up, or first-time buyers coming into the market are qualifying for a mortgage. So that's a good sign. And on top of that, we haven't heard sort of widespread news about defaults increasing. In fact, some less lenders are sort of de-risking on that side of things, and you're seeing that then add to their bottom line.
Yeah, and actually, what you touched on, like corporate social responsibility, is so important. And the idea of, looking back to history and some of the mistakes that have been made, especially in 2008 and the crisis that we saw unfold, especially in the States with regards to their banking system. Like just dialing back, there's uncertainty. Let's put some measures in place to make sure that, this doesn't become like a really, really massive problem. That's actually very encouraging to hear. We have a question from the audience, very, very subjective question, but it is Marilyn Sinclair's asking, her daughter wants to buy her first home. Should she wait or should she get in? And I know you don't have a crystal ball, unless you do. That's up to you to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I always stop short of giving sort of advice to individual home buyers or would-be home buyers when we're talking about people moving into the market for the first time. And I guess the question I think everyone should ask if they're thinking about making their first home purchase or thinking about moving around in some way in the housing market is, do you think the Greater Toronto Area over the medium to long term is going to continue to see growth? Do you think that we're going to continue to be a spot where newcomers to Canada put down roots and either take on employment or start businesses or what have you? I certainly think yes. I think we got a lot going for us in the GTA in terms of the diversity of the economy. We got a lot going for us because of the cultural diversity that we see building on a continuous basis, year in and year out. And so will we continue to see businesses want to set up in Toronto? Absolutely. Will we continue to want to see people move here? Absolutely. And so will we continue to see, the demand for housing remain strong and supporting values, over the medium to long term? I think so. Over the short term, we're in a bit of a period of uncertainty right now. And so, is it possible that we see some volatility in sales and listings and prices? Sure it is. But housing is a long-term investment, and it's proven to be a good long-term investment, throughout the decade.
I agree. It's all about your approach to it, and if you're in it for the long run, I think you'll be fine. So I echo your comments. So you touched on this as well with regards to the single-family stats as well as the condo stats that you showed us. So how do you think that's going to unfold within the next couple of years? Because we see condos are a great way for first-time home buyers to get into the market. It's more affordable. So how do you think that whole thing is going to play out?
Sure. I mean, there's no doubt if you think about, the GTA, whether you're talking about Vaughan or, other parts of York region or other 905 regions of the 416, housing is expensive. And part of the reason for that is that, we have had issues bringing on more supply, and kudos to, different levels of government. I think everyone gets it now that we do have a supply shortage and we're not seeing, or in that moving forward, we should see a greater diversity of home types come online. But as that unfolds, I think the condominium apartment market will continue to be an entry point for first-time buyers into the marketplace. Right now, we have seen a pretty strong uptick in listings. And certainly, there's that suggests that there's some uncertainty, at least in the investment side of the market. But I think as we move through 2021 and into 2022, especially. I mean, the future looks bright in terms of a vaccine for COVID and what have you. So when we get to the other side of COVID, let's think about what that means. Number one, we'll start to see those stronger immigration targets come into place, and people will be, setting up roots in Toronto and looking for a place to live. Number two, we'll see a return of non-permanent migration. I mean, we went from 90,000 net non-permanent migrants in 2019 to basically nothing in 2020, and that's all on the back of COVID. So do we assume that we see more, non-permanent migrants coming back to Toronto when we get to the other side of COVID? For sure, and that's going to backstop, investor-held rental units and that as well. And so, the condominium apartment market is going to continue to be an important segment overall. As we move forward, it's just a segment right now that you're sort of facing a bit of uncertainty, especially on the investor side of things, and that's impacted the rental market as well. But with population growth set to continue, with non-permanent migration set to improve, I think that bodes well for the condo market, longer term.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, all the fundamentals are there, just setting it up for success and continued growth. So last 60 seconds, if you have to leave us with the golden nugget for the weekend, going into the weekend, what is that, Jason?
Sure. I think, short term, there's still some uncertainty. We don't know how things are going to unfold case-wise, public health-wise, and what measures will be put into place. But I think longer term, the future is bright for the Greater Toronto Area in terms of the overall regional economy, and people moving here and setting up businesses or taking on employment, and they'll be looking for a place to live, whether they're looking to rent a home or buy a home. And so I think people who are working in the real estate space, as we move through 2021 and into 2022, we'll continue to see demand for housing in the GTA.
Awesome. Jason, on behalf of the City of Vaughan Chamber, it was a pleasure having you. Jason Mercer, Chief Market Analyst for the Toronto Real Estate Board. Thank you very much, sir, for being here.
Thanks very much. I enjoyed the last couple of days. I appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thanks. We hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. Lots of valuable content, lots of valuable information. Just a reminder that everyone's going to get a copy of this recording post-conference. It'll be made available to you so you can reference back what all of our speakers are saying, and it's a lot of good stuff in here. So let's get into it. Our second speaker, I'd like to now introduce Armina Hassakorians. I got that right? Yes. Okay. Acting Manager, Policy Planning at the City of Vaughan, to provide us an update on area-specific studies and block plans. So Armina started her career in the private sector and made the move to public sector work at the City of Vaughan just over 20 years ago. So starting in the zoning department and then joining the development planning department, where she worked for 12 years on a variety of development applications. In 2011, she made the move to policy planning, where she led policy projects such as the citywide secondary suite study, as well as area-specific studies, including secondary plans for the city's new community areas and block plans for both residential communities and employment areas. She is currently in the role of Acting Manager of Short-Range Planning in the Policy Planning and Environmental Sustainability Department, where she works with a team of planners who are overseeing the department's ongoing secondary plans, area-specific studies, and block plan applications. She is a full member of the Ontario Professional Planners Institute and the Canadian Institute of Planners since 2004. Armina, over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Good morning, everybody. And I want to echo everyone's well wishes. Happy birthday. With that, I'm just going to share my screen and let's get right into the presentation.
That's perfect. We could see it.
Here we go. That's wonderful. And everyone can see that? That's great. So today we're here to speak to you about city building and environmental stewardship. But before I get started, what I would like to do is just give you a little bit of our department's overview. The Policy Planning and Environmental Sustainability Department works to establish policy framework to guide development of safe, livable, sustainable, and complete communities by providing Vaughan Council with Planning Act-based policy tools to support long-term growth in city building. The department's divided into 3 teams: the long-range team, And you heard from my colleague Fausto yesterday, for those of you who were online, at the short range team, of which I'm now the acting manager, and which looks at place-based studies to build transit supportive communities. And the third group that we work really closely with is the environmental sustainability team. Now, as I mentioned, the department is divided into these 3 teams, but we work very collaboratively together on a number of our projects. So there's a lot of discussion and a lot of collaboration when we are moving forward with our projects, specifically secondary plans. Before we get into the secondary plan, I wanted to just give a little bit of an overview of Vaughan Official Plan 2010. All 3 teams work with the Vaughan Official Plan 2010. And as those of you who heard from Fausto yesterday recognize that we all work with it in a slightly different way, but it is the document that leads development for us in the city. This slide shows a few of the schedules which are part of Volume 1 of the Vaughan Official Plan 2010, which we also refer to as VOP 2010. What we have here is the urban structure, which is Schedule 1, Schedule 1A, the urban boundary, Schedule 13, land use, and Schedule 14A, areas subject to secondary plans, which notes existing secondary plans, secondary plan areas to be approved, and required secondary plans. So it's through this document that we get our direction and our marching orders for secondary plans. Once a required secondary plan is approved, it's added to Chapter 11 of Vaughan Official Plan 2010, Volume 2. So at this point, you may be asking yourself, what is a secondary plan? What does it do? Secondary plans are intended to provide a policy framework for appropriate development and may include policies related to the vision and character of a defined area, provide land use designations, height and density requirements, the appropriate mix and location and intensity of land uses, urban design policies, policies related to streets, the transportation network generally, block patterns, as well as policies related to municipal servicing and infrastructure. Secondary plans are city initiated, so they are led by our department. And the final output or deliverable on this is a document adopted by council and approved by the Region of York, which provides and describes all of the types of policies I've mentioned above. And just generally, a secondary plan provides for an additional structure for development of new community areas, employment areas, and intensification areas. So speaking about secondary plans, we right now have 4 ongoing secondary plan studies of land use. I'm going to start off with a bit of a description of the Concord Go secondary plan. Now, just to provide you with a little bit of context, Concord Go, if you're looking at the screen right now, it is a local center, and it's situated predominantly in Ward 4, but there is a small portion of it that does extend into Ward 5. The overall Concord Go secondary plan was adopted in June of 2014. The secondary plan area, as I mentioned before, these are area-based studies, so they do have boundaries associated with them. The boundaries for this secondary plan are Rivermead Road to the north, Bowes Road, and the CN Rail Corridor to the west, with the eastern and southern boundary being the Highway 407 ETR and the boundary of the Parkway Belt West Plan. Now, you can't see all of that in detail here, so I invite you all to visit our website, and that's the City of Vaughan website, and there'll be detailed information on all of these studies there. The area of the secondary plan is approximately 162 hectares. The Concord Go Center Mobility Hub study is the study right now that's underway. So the secondary plan was completed, and coming out of the secondary plan, there was an identification of a deferral area through the approval of the secondary plan. The city right now is advancing the Mobility Hub study for lands in that deferral area. and area of the approved secondary plan. The Mobility Hub study is considering land use and transportation planning to support a complete community centered around the potential for a GO station in the area of Highway 7 and Bowes Road. So you're going to hear this idea behind complete communities come through in a number of our secondary plans. And that's kind of one of the cornerstones of city building for us. The second ongoing secondary plan I wanted to talk to you about is the Promenade Center secondary plan. The city has initiated this secondary plan study for the Promenade Mall and surrounding areas, and it's referenced as the Promenade Center secondary plan. The study will establish a vision, key principles, and a complete land use plan to guide future development. The study includes an extensive transportation study considering all modes of travel, including walking, cycling, taking transit, and driving. It will also determine the plan for a complete community with mixed uses for pedestrian-friendly area. This secondary plan area is located in Ward 5 of the city. The study area is approximately 95 acres and is situated south of Center Street, west of Bathurst, north of Clark, and the eastern boundary of the lands are the existing developments. So that's a Thornhill-based study, and it's underway. Finally, I want to speak to you about Weston and 7. This is, again, another ongoing secondary plan. The secondary plan study for Weston and 7 was initiated through a phased approach, with phase 1 of the study concluding in 2019. So there is significant work that's already taken place here, and that's been completed. Phase 2 and 3 were initiated in May of 2020 and are currently underway. Weston and 7 will be a distinct urban area with a variety of commercial and entertainment destinations, providing housing options and jobs within walking distance to the Highway 7 Rapidway. The area of this study is approximately 129 hectares, and the surrounding area of Weston Road and Highway 7, the intersection. The study area, which is bounded by Fieldstone Drive and Portage Parkway to the north, Highway 400 corridor to the east, the Highway 407 corridor to the south, and Ainsley Grove and Whitmore Road to the west. The area, as I mentioned, is bisected by Highway 7, a regional rapid transit corridor, and is defined as a primary center in the new Vaughan official plan. Now, the final secondary plan study that is underway right now, you don't see here, there's reference to it here, and that's the Vaughan Metropolitan Center, the VMC. So we've given this study its own slide because it has a special place in our hearts. The Vaughan Metropolitan Center secondary plan is the secondary plan for the city's downtown. The city's downtown is located in Ward 4 and can be described as having a northern boundary of Portage Parkway. The southern limit of the area is defined by Highway 407. The western limit is bounded by Highway 400. So it's just on the opposite side of Weston and 7, 400 dividing the two. And the eastern limit can be described as Creditstone Road. An update to the initial Vaughan Metropolitan Center secondary plan, the VMC secondary plan update, was initiated in August 2020. So this area has a completed secondary plan. We're right now in the midst of updating that work. And the purpose for the secondary plan update is to address new provincial and regional policies and confirm that the framework established by the VMC secondary plan is still relevant considering the nature of existing approved and proposed development in the area. The city has a dedicated team, the VMC program department, leading work in the VMC, including the VMC secondary plan update. So we have key staff, and it's a multidisciplinary team that works specifically in this area. And if there are any follow-up questions, we do have contact information for you if you're interested in getting more details on the VMC. Updates to the Vaughan Metropolitan Center secondary plan must continue to recognize that the VMC area is the city's priority intensification area. So we have a number of primary centers. I apologize, I think there's a bit of an emergency happening outside. See if they'll pass in a second.
As long as it's a City of Vaughan Fire Department fire truck, we're okay with it.
Yeah, it is. That it is for sure. And I maybe check the news later to see how what caused that. But as I was saying, the city does have a number of primary centers, but this is the city's priority intensification center, being our downtown. As I was mentioning, while ensuring the area continues to develop as a complete community, the secondary plan update is going to take into consideration a number of other matters, as was mentioned earlier, in relation to updates on policy and recognizing the current situation and the development potential in the area. So from the secondary plan, we're going to move into block plans. Once secondary plans are complete, the city may determine if a block plan process is required. Now, block plans may not be familiar to everybody because they're not done in all municipalities. Not all municipalities undertake this additional process. Block plans are undertaken in Vaughan at the discretion of the city. So where it's determined warranted, or where a secondary plan policy would actually speak to a block plan being required, that's when we would undertake this process. The block plan is an applicant-initiated process, so unlike our secondary plans, we don't lead this process. It requires a group of landowners to come together and make a submission, an application to the city. And they're done for both employment areas as well as residential communities. The purpose of the block plan is to address the extent and precise location of the secondary plan elements. So you can see the flow through of information where the secondary plan provides us with a policy regime. The block plan then takes that to another level and starts looking at the elements and those land use requirements, such as, but not limited to, the location of various land uses, including schools, community facilities, parks, the determination of a natural heritage network, just to name a few. The block plan provides a more solid level of detail to the conceptual information and provides the visual aspects of the policy structure that's developed through the secondary plan. The map that you're seeing here actually shows the three areas right now for which we have ongoing block plan applications. Two of these, Block 34 East and Block 59, are employment areas, and Block 60 West is a residential community. Now, I know we're just showing 3 block plans, but there are a number of other areas in the pipe ready to come down with block plan applications. So we perceive to see a lot more work in our near future around block plans. So just moving to the next slide, as I finish up the first part of our presentation, which outlines the initial stages of city building, the policy development around it, and how that will ultimately get implemented through subsequent processes, I'd like to show you the City of Vaughan terms of council service excellence strategy, because you see city building is noted here, and closely linked to city building is environmental stewardship. Quite fittingly, I can now introduce the second part of our presentation and its presenter, Harry French, who will speak to aspects of environmental stewardship. Harry is the program manager for Climate Wise Business Network at Windfall Ecology Center. In the areas of sustainability and climate change action, Harry specializes in facilitating collaborative solutions focused on enhancing community, well-being, and improving business productivity. Harry draws from a wealth of experiences in the public sector, private, and non-for-profit sector. He was an assistant deputy minister in the Ontario government, a vice president of planning at a York region-based national consulting firm, Marshall Macklin and Monahan, Director of Community Power Services Group at the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association, and a research director at the Conference Board of Canada. Harry is currently leading Climate Wise Building Challenge. And with that, Harry, take it away. Just let me know when you're ready and I'll start moving the slides along.
Great. Thank you very much, Armina, and thank you very much for sharing some of your time this morning. As Armina mentioned, I'm Program Manager of the Climate Wise Business Network. ClimateWise is a program of the Windfall Ecology Center located in Aurora. Windfall Ecology Center is dedicated to building sustainable communities in York Region. At ClimateWise, we work with organizations, both municipalities and commercial businesses, and we help them to set energy reduction targets. And doing that save dollars, operational dollars, improve their brand, address the climate crisis while confronting GHG, by reducing GHG's greenhouse gas emissions from their operations. We also run, as the logos show here, the Ontario Benchmarking Help Center, which helps your businesses like yours report energy and water use under the Ontario Energy, Water and Reporting and Benchmarking Initiative, EWRB, commonly known as that. We also are about to launch the Ontario Benchmarking Help Center, which helps businesses like yours, which is a friendly building challenge, building competition that will recognize and awards existing buildings in York Region for their efforts to reduce sustainable, to be more sustainable. Could you change the slide, please? Or we got it there. Okay, I'm on. Okay, I should be on the drivers. Yes, I said existing buildings. I'm not talking about secondary plans or development lands here. We saw this presentation as an opportunity to talk to the commercial real estate sector through the eyes of the City of Vaughan's service excellence strategy that Amine mentioned on her last slide. As an environmental stewardship priority within the service excellence strategy focuses on engaging with the commercial sector. Compliance with the energy and water reporting and benchmarking program is one of the key metrics of that. Participation of buildings in the City of Vaughan in the EWRB program is a key metric under the service excellence strategy. So we took this opportunity to talk to you about this program today. There are many reasons for the inclusion of this metric. We know, for example, in the US EPA, research shows us that the simple act of benchmarking saves dollars by reducing energy consumption, and of course, addresses issues associated with the climate crisis that we're all dealing with. CBN has partnered with the City of Vaughan to assist in delivering this metric. If you can move to the next slide. We accomplished this delivery through the distribution of an online survey to the commercial real estate sector that focused on energy retrofit and sustainability drivers. The survey was to accomplish a number of key objectives as outlined on the slide: understanding sustainability drivers, document barriers to energy efficiency, and build awareness of EWRB reporting dates. We targeted a survey. It was distributed to 153 contacts and 52 commercial real estate companies and property management companies within the City of Vaughan over the period of July to September 2020. The survey received a 10%, or actually 31% response rate, which actually was only 10 unique responses, but they were rich in content. This discussion shares some of the highlights from the survey and offers the opportunity for you to participate in the work in order to develop a more robust profile of the energy retrofit and sustainability drivers for your sector here in the City of Vaughan. And I want to give you a few examples of the finding. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Amine. In any reduction activity, developing a baseline and setting a target is a critical first step in energy reduction activities. Few of our respondents from our survey have set targets or developed a sustainability plan. Responders identified a variety of reasons for not moving ahead with energy retrofits, including difficulty in finding capital to difficulty in getting corporate approval. On the former, I'm sure that the industry is tracking the recent federal funding announcement for energy retrofits for commercial buildings that will be available through the Infrastructure Bank. Change the slide, please. Capacity and knowledge, in terms of another key finding from the survey. Respondents prioritized tenant comfort and asset renewal as main drivers for sustainability, but surprisingly, capacity was defined as a barrier to move forward. For example, it was interesting that very few of the responders had a good knowledge of the win-win benefits of green leases that we're seeing more often in negotiations between tenants and landlords in today's market. Can you move the slide forward, please? Research tells us that benchmarking, which is inherent in the EWRB program, can contribute to a more resilient city while reducing cost for you, improving your brand and building tenant comfort, tenant loyalty and comfort. The buildings owners who responded were generally aware of the EWRB program, which was good to know. That said, EWRB participation, that is the number of buildings that actually reported in 2019, was only 34% of the total building stock needed to report in the city. So there's a big gap to be filled. This was low compliance in 2019 and suggests that greater EWRB communication efforts are needed to that segment of the commercial real estate sector that did not respond, which may be some of you in the audience. Please change the slide. Good data makes for informed decision-making. We plan to share the survey results with the commercial real estate sector so you can take advantage of many of the other responses that we did have. We are hoping to share this both with responders and with non-responders to help them understand the kind of data that is available, and through a greater response have a more robust data set that we can share with you. And I want to share with you hot off the press, and this is necessarily good news, just yesterday, I received information from the EWRB program run by the Ministry of Energy, Northern Development and Mines that in 2020 reporting year, now this was all sort of impacted by COVID-19, the participation rate of buildings in the city of Vaughan dropped to 23% from 34%. So we're not going in the right direction. We need good data. The more data we have, the better programs can be designed to influence and help building owners such as yourselves respond to the opportunities that's presented. You can help us do this by, you'll be able to click on the slides when you get them here and link to our survey and complete the online survey. Once that survey is done, if we get a good population included, you'll have good data to make decisions. We will aggregate and share the results to help you make the right decision in your organization to save dollars, build your brand, contribute to tenant comfort while helping to address the climate crisis that we're all dealing with. So thanks very much. I look forward to any of your questions.
Thank you very much, both Armina and Harry. Very, very insightful presentation. It's exciting to see what the future holds for the city of Vaughan. And I echo those comments, Harry. Like, it's very important to engage in conversation, dialogue, with the private and public sector. So looking forward to that. For those of us that are just joining, please put your questions in the Q&A feature, and we are going to try to get through all of them. So first and foremost, this question regarding the secondary plan. So other than the 4 secondary plans, are there any others that are being formulated for the future of Vaughan? And this is being asked by, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Gul Jacobi. Oh, you're on mute, Arlena.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. And there was the answer. No, thank you for the question. The secondary plans that are currently underway are all required through Vaughan Official Plan 2010. Again, I go back to the presentation that my colleague Fausto provided yesterday on the future, the official plan review. Work is still underway, so we're not aware yet if there are going to be, or where the new studies or land use studies, secondary plans, site-specific area studies may be, but that's information that will be considered through the official plan review process, which Fausto walked everyone through yesterday.
Okay, awesome. And we do have time for one more question, I should say. Let's just switching over to the EWRB. So we touched on that participation and lack thereof. So what can you tell us about the participation rate in 2020? Has it increased or?
The rate the EWRB program requires buildings over 100,000 square feet to report annually to the Ontario government on their energy and water use. In the city of Vaughan, there are, according to the database, 360 buildings over 100,000 square feet that are required to report. And that number will double in 2023 when the over 50,000 buildings, square foot buildings are included. So in 2020, for buildings over 100,000, which are 360 of them, only 23% reported. And that is down from 34% last year. So the problem with that is that when those buildings report, the data is shared on the Ontario data catalog, and we have then the opportunity as a sector to see how we are comparing to others of our type in various building sectors and also across the province. And I can tell you right now from my readings of the first data set that was put out this year for the Ontario Building Catalog, the region of York overall, I haven't done the work for Vaughan, is not performing as well in terms of the energy efficiency of their buildings as other buildings are in the province overall. So with that low reporting rate, we are not getting good information to address the problem, which is needs to be addressed because it's all about delivering on the service excellence strategy that Amine mentioned earlier on. We don't know why the rate's gone down. I'm sure COVID-19 had an impact in 2020. But once you've done it in 2019, the process to do that in 2020 is very simple. So something's happened in 2020, and I'm sure COVID had an impact on it.
I believe so as well. And we appreciate both of your times. Can you let our audience members know where they can contact both of you, your contact details? I think it was on a slide, correct? There we go.
There we go.
Perfect. So obviously on behalf of the City of Vaughan, on behalf of the Vaughan Chamber, thank you both of you for spending your time with us today. We hope to see you both soon and have a great weekend.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. So very, very insightful presentations. This is so impactful. And for those of you that are just joining us right now, we have a few speakers that are coming on and talking about different topics. We're really excited about it. And without wasting any time, we're going to get into the next speaker right now. Brandon Correa, he is the Manager of Special Projects at the City of Vaughan, and he's going to be providing us with an update on the comprehensive zoning bylaw review. Brandon, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to get my slides to share. Can everyone see my slides now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect. So glad to be here today, although virtually at the virtual real estate conference. My 20 minutes or so is going to be focused on zoning. What is the comprehensive zoning bylaw? Trying to put a bit of a definition to that and a bit of an update. For those of you who have done business or done real estate or anything in Vaughan, you would know that we've had the same zoning bylaw citywide 1-88 for now over about 30 years. And so we were tasked as a city based on the current official plan, VOP 2010, which you've heard a lot about, both in Armene's previous presentation, but also with Fausto yesterday. The comprehensive zoning bylaw is a legislative conformity exercise that starts and is predicated based on the Vaughan official plan. And we're going to talk a lot a bit about that. Now, the review itself that I'm kind of advertising a little bit today has been a 3-year project, a 3-year study. And through that, we've done a substantial amount of public consultation, including over 15 ward and citywide based open houses. We have a stakeholder advisory group with both internal and external members of staff, as well as some community people. We spent about a year doing background papers and technical studies and data analysis to say, what are the current gaps with the current 188 bylaw and what needs to be improved before we can bring forward a new regime. And one of the major gaps with 188 was it was truly difficult to read, interpret, and use. It was confusing. One of my first jobs at the city was as a zoning plans examiner. And so my job is when a building permit came in for whether it's a residential house, an addition, or a business, or a new development, they usually needed a whack of technical variances or zoning bylaw amendments for things that were very technical in nature. And often to the average person didn't necessarily make clear sense. And so we had the task of trying to take really a bylaw, it still is a zoning bylaw, but to try to use language and try to use a structure where it makes as much black and white sense as possible. And so we've completely And now keep in mind, it's in draft. We're in the third draft of this project. It's not finalized and it hasn't been passed by council. We did recently on the 29th of October hold a public hearing to get input, and it's ongoing. But everything we talk about and in this project is in draft. And I just wanted to make that point. Now, so what we have in draft so far is a new bylaw, which is meant to restructure the way you approach what can I do on any particular piece of land, whether that's commercial land, employment land, emerging mixed use land, or perhaps more suburban residential land. Now, the first thing you're always going to do is start with the map, and there's another slide that will show the GIS mapping. But as soon as you know what your map is, the first 6 sections of the new bylaw are purely administrative, as they're shown in gray, and the second section 7 to 12 and 13 will take you through what's permitted based on what your zone is. So if you're in a yellow zone, like a residential, or a red VMC zone, and we'll talk about the pre-zoning of the VMC, you only read that section of the bylaw. There would be no reason, if you were in an employment zone, so let's say you're in number 11, there'd be no reason to read any text in 10, 9, 8, or 7. However, you would have to read the definitions and the administrative sections of 1, 2, and 3. So I don't want to get highly technical, but if you compare that to what you would have to do with 188, to do a zoning review on the current bylaw, you have to read the book from front to back. That means it's complicated for you trying to figure out what you can do. It also means it takes a lot more time for staff to administrate these types of applications when they come forward, whether it's supposed to be a simple minor variance or a more complicated urban development project. The goal of this project is to really modernize a bylaw and create an ease of administration. And so what we've done, is created GIS overlays. So instead of putting tons and tons of text and all of these rules and exceptions and subnotes and things that you'll find in bylaws all across Ontario, really, especially some of the more dated ones, we're now utilizing mapping and ArcEsri GIS technology to put overlays, which will quite simply say, this is what you can generally do on the land, but if you're within this overlay, then there might be a couple extra rules, and they're completely based on policy, and they're completely based on what the Vaughan Official Plan 2010 says, for example, or other applicable legislation. So for example, the city of Vaughan has several pockets where we're subject to wellhead protection. And when you are within a wellhead protection area and there's some water and aquifer vulnerability, there is restrictions at every policy level as to certain uses that you can or cannot do. For example, if you're within the core of a wellhead protection area, then the new zoning bylaw wouldn't permit, for an example, a gas station in that neighborhood. And so without having to write that with thousands of pages of text, we were able to create a dozen or so, or a handful of overlays, which gives very prescriptive information. Another example would be the Woodbridge Special Policy Area, which is traditionally an area in Woodbridge which has some flood potential. And so that there's a special policy area that does have restrictions, for example. In that case, it limits like the ability to do secondary suites in some instances. And so that's one efficiency of the new bylaws. We're able to actually use technology and mapping to display a lot of information, whereas all of this would have been in text in the past for the most part. The other thing we've done, and I think it's interesting from a real estate perspective, is proposed an established neighborhood overlay. And so you'll see on the mapping here, generally where it applies to, it comes directly out of a policy study that was really meant to define and characterize mature neighborhoods at a policy level. And what this overlay does is it really defines the relationship between the building heights that are permitted for both reconstruction or enhancements to a dwelling based on the existing character of the existing home in the existing area, both for building height and the front yard setback. And although modest, what it basically says, not to overcomplicate it, is if you take your existing home, which may be a bungalow in many cases, and especially a lot of cases with a lot of older neighborhoods, and you wanted to build a new home, maybe someone comes in and they purchase the land, it's a really old home, they actually want to start from scratch or build a second story addition, like what would be allowed? What the new bylaw says in these mature neighborhoods is you can take your existing home and you can add 3 meters. If that 3 meters ends up being higher than the minimum in the bylaw, then you don't get it. You get the minimum in the bylaw, which is in this case, it's 9.5 meters. And that's what this graphic's trying to show. But in no cases in the new bylaw would it say, in this particular lot, you are only permitted a 1-story bungalow. And that comes out of the VOP 2010, which recognizes as, although there are processes to preserve heritage and things like that, and on an entire site plan control process, in any single family dwelling zone in this new bylaw, you would be permitted to build at least a 2-story home. But then of course there are restrictions to say you couldn't go to 4 or 5 or 6 stories unless you're in a particular zone or a particular neighborhood. Now, commercial zones are fairly traditional. I wouldn't say there's not a lot of substantial change from some of the commercial zones in 188, but where you will see the change are in the definitions. And as boring as it sounds, the difference between the word and or is huge in the world of zoning, and I can't make that any less entertaining. But what I mean by that is, if a definition says your business has to be the following and the following versus or, that could be the difference between getting a building permit and a business license and being told you need to go through maybe a 1-year process and maybe an expensive process to justify that you should be allowed. It could be as little as 1 word. And so we've taken 3 drafts at this, well, 3 publicly released drafts, but to get there, iterative drafts along the way to try to get these definitions to a point where they're agile, they're promoting entrepreneurship, they're promoting small business, they're promoting business, while at the same time conforming to the official plan. One of the key and most fundamental principles that comes right out of the Planning Act is that the zoning bylaw must conform to the official plan. It can choose to be more restrictive than what's contemplated in the official plan, but it cannot choose to be more permissive. So if something's not permitted in the official plan and in the secondary plans that Armine was describing in the previous presentation, or that Foster was describing, then it wouldn't be permissible under the Planning Act to try that through this project. And so there's a relationship between these presentations and between these documents and how the official plan and the zoning bylaw work together. We made mention a few times, I think, throughout this, throughout today about the Vaughan Metropolitan Center. And in this project, the comprehensive review, what we're trying to do in draft right now is pre-zone the VMC to essentially mimic and match, for lack of a better word, the plan and the vision of the secondary plan for this areas. Now, the secondary plan has 4 precincts in the VMC, and it prescribes a range of mix of uses, as well as heights and densities. So it doesn't say exactly that there'll be a 20 or a 30 or a 40-story building, but it says in this area, there'll be a range of buildings between, let's say, 10 and 15 and 35 stories. And we've seen some approvals site specifically go above that. Now, however, the pre-zoning that we're contemplating directly matches the upper and lower limits of the plan. So to suffice to say, around the subway, around our downtown, developers can come in with a site plan application if this was to pass. And without the need for a full rezoning, they would be able to put up a pretty substantial building. And the goal there is to help the acceleration of our downtown, of that entrepreneurship, and to feed that buzz. The only reason we're comfortable promoting that through this project is because we have that approved plan, and this plan has been materializing. It's our downtown. It's the place where we have $1 billion of infrastructure with transit and so much is happening. You know, right across the street, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit for the sake of time. Right across the street, you have Weston and 7, which is an area that has been identified as needing a secondary plan, and some work has begun. We're not, through this project, through the comprehensive review, taking the same approach as across the highway in the VMC, where I just described we're pre-zoning, because that plan doesn't exist. And so it's important to note when you're doing a citywide project, there's no one size fits all approach. We couldn't take the same approach in the VMC, we don't think, as in Weston and 7, because that's an area that's still going through that detailed planning process. And I chose that in particular because they're side by side. And so what we did in the Weston and 7 area was based on the land use schedules that you saw in Armine's presentation, Schedule 13. There are land use designations here, notwithstanding that there's still a detailed planning process to go through. So we have this old 1988 zoning. We know we have to go through this process, so we can't go all the way in pre-zone like we did the downtown. Well, what's the next best thing? And so what we did is we created a general mixed use zone, which generally conforms and applies the policies of this orange and what you would see in this area. Now, what it doesn't permit, as of right, is the condominium mixed use built form that you would get across the street. That being said, at a later date, applications probably will come forward or have come forward in various areas across the city, not to choose any in particular, to implement these various plans. we still expect that's going to happen all throughout the city. There's still going to be a very thorough planning process. You're still going to have developers who want to amend either the bylaw or in some cases the bylaw and the official plan. But what this project is catching up for 30 years to give a starting point to say, even when you are amending that plan anywhere across the city, you're choosing a new set of zones with a new set of definitions that that really capture the different emerging and mix of built forms. So when you get a subdivision in the future, it's not always all semis or all towns or all singles. You usually get a mix, and so the new zones are built to be adaptable to that as well. And then the one thing, just as a COVID response, not necessarily just for COVID, but I think it's certainly focal, is we've had to look at home occupations as I sit here at home and do this presentation. The current bylaws language is a little bit outdated. It says, basically a doctor for emergency purposes only could operate out of a business out of their home, essentially, with a site plan approved by council. And so we've looked at that and said, we know not every use is with nuisance and with policy, not everything can be done out of a home, but certainly we've learned through COVID a lot of business-oriented, business professional office, accountants, and retail, and there's a lot of office-related uses and commercial type stuff that can be done out of a home. And so it's finding that right balance between accidentally commercializing the home, which is where the official plan does not permit, while being cognizant of both the pandemic, but also the reality of a changing use of the home space as being a bit of a hybrid. And so the new bylaw is more permissive. It does recognize that if you were a home-based accountant or real estate agent, that would be recognized, whereas in the past, technically speaking, it wasn't. And so there's some modernization there, and one that we're still taking comments on as things evolve. The other thing that's relatively new to the new zoning bylaws, we have a lot of brand new mixed use zones. 188 is very traditional. You have your employment zone, your commercial zone, your residential zone. Very far and few between were examples of actual mixed use developments. And so what happens is every time one comes in, and the planning is saying, hey, we need these mixed use developments, but every time one comes in, it's almost like reinventing the wheel, because you have to write a site specific bylaw based on the 1988 exception. The new bylaw will give a framework, and you'll see codes like GMU, that's general mixed use, where there should be a lot less exceptions. It should be a lot more straightforward to administrate the planning process. I left an example here of a colleague's email to me, which was originated from a tenant issue, and I won't point to the actual building of the unit, but basically they wanted a particular tenant, which from all eyes on the street, you would think might be permitted there, but historically hasn't been, because it had a very formal employment EM1 zoning. And when you have formal employment EM1 zoning, it's restrictive on things like retail and restaurant. It's not as permissive. However, the plan, Schedule 13 that I showed before, was mixed use in nature. So although we couldn't pre-zone, residential towers, and there's many reasons why we didn't go all the way with all of the permissions contemplated by the plan, we were able to update the zone with a wider range of uses, where in this case, the tenant wanted to put in a business professional office, whereas that unit used to be, I guess, considerably tapped out theoretically. They're now permitted. Well, not now. They would be theoretically if this bylaw is passed. And so in this case, they have the choice of, well, do I amend 188 and wait, or do I wait for the new bylaw to pass? And so it's a bit of a waiting game. But the good news is there's more examples like that, where in the past, businesses, especially new ones, new entrepreneurs, new evolving businesses that didn't even exist in the 80s are now recognized, and you can pull permits without having to, in some cases, go through thousands of dollars worth of processes, minor variances. And so we've added things to the bylaw, for example, that didn't exist in 188 to recognize the city's taking on a new built form. We have that condominium development coming, and it's going to continue. And so the zoning bylaw does put things like tower separation. A small picture, I purposely took it from this angle of the Bellaria Towers at Jane and Rutherford, because if you're not careful with tower separation, you can get issues with things like sunlight, wind, and privacy. And so obviously it's a major consideration of the planning and design process, but when you put it into your bylaw to have minimum standards, it promotes, sustainable and good design. That'll be good for the tenants of the future. And so it's subtle, and these are the types of things you would expect through the planning process to occur. But when it becomes part of the new bylaw, it gives a little bit more teeth to guiding the architects and planners designing these sites. This new bylaw is not meant to produce what buildings will look like or predetermine how a site will look. We wanted to provide that opportunity to promote good design, to promote urban squares. And so we've created a framework for things like urban squares and new parkland typologies for intensification areas. But we do need to protect established neighborhoods. And so the new bylaw does have things like angular plane, which is right from the official plan. And it's a little bit new to Vaughan and from a zoning perspective, but it's been in the GTA for a long time. If you're building a mid-rise building adjacent to an established neighborhood, there needs to be some level of transition, particularly in the heights and scale and massing of buildings. And so depending on which zone and if you abut the rear yard, the new zoning bylaw will have an angular plane requirement, which is meant to help the shadowing and some of the impact that intensification places on existing neighborhoods. It's meant to help the cause. The other thing with the established neighborhood overlay that I mentioned earlier is when new development comes in or as homes mature, we want to make sure that they're generally compatible and keep the character and feel of these neighborhoods. And so, in this case, there's a little bit of concern, like maybe this home is a little bit too tall for the area, but in this case, there's no amendments. It's completely as of right. They pulled a permit. Any of these neighbors could build the exact same house, whereas in the bottom example, not in Vaughan, it's a little bit more uniform. But so it's striking that balance and making sure that it's still a zoning bylaw. It's not the urban design guideline. It's not a subdivision control. It is a rule of that's predicated traditionally on setbacks, building height, and landscaping. So it's like, how far do you go? We spent 3 years with those types of questions. And for things like employment zones, we really haven't observed many issues with 188. And so we went with the old expression, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Our new employment zones look just like the old ones, very, very similar. But like I said, based on the official plan, there have been some tweaks to the definitions and to some of the notes. But for our traditional and what we've done well historically in Vaughan with a lot of our core employment and manufacturing, we've more or less left alone. And that would conclude my slides. I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you everyone for listening.
Hey, Brandon, that was awesome. Thank you for that. So we're opening it up to the audience members. Obviously, if you have any questions, please post them using the Q&A feature. Brandon, in the meantime, can you just share where our audience members can actually connect with you, or how they can connect with you?
Yes, I should have had a slide. It's Brandon.Correa, and I'll send my email to you so you can forward to everyone. It's Brandon.Correa@vaughan.ca.
Awesome.
And I'll type it in as well, just so everyone has it.
Please do, yeah. So we don't have any questions from the audience members just yet, but for me personally, from listening to your presentation, I'm connecting what all of our speakers are saying, and it seems like the slogan, "The best days are ahead," is really the case for the city of Vaughan. It seems like we're modernizing everything. We're taking a step back and looking at what do we need to do to ensure the city of Vaughan's success going forward. And is that fair to say with what you're working on as well?
For sure. I'd certainly like to say the city had, with legislation, it's been 30 years since we've updated the zoning bylaw from 188 to where we are today, almost complete this project. However, it's not our goal to wait 30 years to improve it over time. Fossil yesterday presented on the official plan review. That official plan review is to update Vaughan Official Plan 2010. And this project is to implement Vaughan Official Plan 2010. So what I mean by that is, as soon as that update is complete, the zoning team comes right back to implement that new update. It becomes an assembly line. Rather than waiting 30 years and development catches up in the meanwhile, the municipality can do a lot more now with legislation to be basically every 5 years walking with the community and the development through that planning process. There of course are complexities when things go to the OMB or now the LPAT, and there's complexities in that planning process, and sometimes extend timelines. And that's why it's 10 years out. It's 2020 now, that why we're now reviewing our 2010 plan, when theoretically maybe that could have been 2015. So there's reasons why things have been dragged out, but there's a relationship, and I wanted to make that connection today between the official plan and how you review the zoning bylaw. Through the next official plan, if new secondary plans are created, that conceptually creates new opportunities for pre-zoning or for new adventures down the road. So I fully agree with your statement that the best is yet to come, but we are trying our best to be progressive and take the new bylaw to a modern state, to a 2020 place, and catch up for 30 years of really patching a new bylaw together, year by year. This is our chance to really hit the refresh button and get a brand new product.
Awesome. And we have a few questions coming in, so we'll try to answer a couple of those. One question is, how does the update / this new plan benefit Vaughan in a post-COVID landscape? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, well, for one, the recognition of a lot more home occupations and being able to license that in some particular cases is one just administrative upgrade. I think the ability to open small business is going to be should be a lot easier theoretically than it was in the past. And I'll give you one example. If you look at bylaw 188, and maybe you wanted to open a car brokerage, for example, just randomly. And maybe because of rents, pressures in rents, and you're a relatively small business, you wanted to share a car brokerage with another broker, for example. You got two people sharing one office essentially for the same purpose. In 188, the definition of unit says one user for one purpose, meaning essentially you wouldn't get two businesses sharing one office, which with office sharing and everything that's evolved between the 80s and now, it just doesn't make sense. So what's happened though over the last 5 or 10 years is someone like that business owner has gone to the committee of adjustment and gotten permission and gotten approval, but had to go through that process to say we're sharing this office. Right. Basically, the new bylaw doesn't say that anymore, and so we would just as of right recognize. And so that's a very small example, but it's one where a small business who where the first few months are everything, and potentially in terms of success fail, might have a better time in terms of what's perceived as red tape or whatnot in terms of pulling permits for businesses. And like I said earlier, some of the definitions, it used to say your business has to have this, and this. You have to have all three. And there's a lot more ors in the definitions because businesses are evolving and not everyone wants to hit the entire niche. Some people are a lot more segmented. And so some of our definitions for business, office, or retail, or some of like the automobile related uses, for example, are written in a way where it should be easier, not harder, to open businesses. We want to promote small business. We want to promote growth in Vaughan, not just, but it's a balance of live, work, and play. So a lot of the bylaw time was spent on that employment, that mixed use, and that commercial zone structure, trying to get in a way to promote new businesses to come, but also to maintain the ability for current businesses, for current manufacturers to remortgage and things like that.
We got perfect. I think what you're saying is, in a nutshell, streamlining that process, right, and empowering business owners to be successful, which is super important. Do you think, Miguel's asking, do you think this is going to be likely implemented in 2021 or 2022? Or do you have an idea exactly?
Yeah, so we went, in terms of the timeline of the bylaw, it's a great question. We were able to hold a virtual public hearing and public open house in October. The goal prior to COVID affecting things slightly was to bring the bylaw forward towards the end of the year. It's really more expected at this point that probably Q1, possibly early Q2, maybe like March, you'll see the bylaw come forward for approval, for final approval. The reason that is because through the process, we received 80 to 100 plus letters of comments, some technical in nature, that we need to look at carefully and respond to. So we're making some of those final edits, and we're having those consultations. And I invite anyone to reach out to you, and I'm going to type my email after this, with any questions, or maybe it's just a clarification or a suggestion, because we're making some of the final edits that are going to go forward. For now, I'm going to say Q1 of 2021, but that's tentative based on our ability to go through a substantial amount of consultation and input that we received. A lot of it's positive and beneficial, but one thing with zoning is what we don't want to do, in particular for this group from a real estate perspective, is particularly needlessly create legal nonconformity. We've seen other projects from other cities where they passed a new bylaw and it made a business or it made a home completely legal nonconforming. And although there are permissions within that, it caused issues for businesses doing things like remortgaging and where the bank says, well, you're non-conforming, so we're not sure if you're even allowed to be there in the long term. So now there's a bigger risk, and we're not sure if we can give you the same rate. So we've noticed that risk from day one as something that could occur, and we've done many things to avoid that. One thing we've done is carry forward, although rewritten, but carry forward over 1,500 site-specific zoning exceptions in a new template in a new updated way, to recognize some of those really specific nuances that apply site by site that you'll never capture in one book citywide. So we took the time, and it was probably the hardest part of the project, but it was to really rewrite and carry forward 1,500 different sites worth of really prescriptive and site specific details. All of that came out of a very particular planning process in the past, a very public process. And so that's one way. And the other way the bylaw does it, you'll see in some of these charts in sections like 8, 9, 10, 11, you'll see charts that say E. You'll say, what does the E mean? The E means if you have an existing business there, it can remain there legally, not legally non-conforming. Because in some cases, you might be somewhere where the official plan above you no longer contemplates that. You might have a restaurant, for example, that is designated, a natural area. Well, natural areas that aren't a place that are as of right going to be permitted restaurants anywhere. But if you have one there, our goal is to not make it legal non-conforming. So you might see an exception or an E, for example, and something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gets complicated the more you open it up. But the goal of this project was to make it, if you have a piece of land, it shouldn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes to know what you can do and what you can't do. Whereas in the past, it took a long time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so very quickly, we're going to wrap up, but very quickly, you're going to be able to access these online, correct? These bylaws, all the changes?
Yeah, so if you wanted to look at the changes in draft right now, you could go to www.zonevon.ca, and everything is there. There's an interactive GIS map where you could click on any property. We can zoom into any property, or you could just generally provide a comment. But you can see the third draft, all site-specific exceptions. And if there's any issue finding that, I would suggest just reach out to me and I will get you there.
Perfect. Thank you. If you don't mind, also when you post your email, just post us that link as well.
Brandon? No problem. I will.
And on behalf of the city of Vaughan, the Vaughan Chamber, you're great. Thank you so much. And you have a great weekend, okay?
Thank you. Happy birthday.
Thank you. All right. So it's been a really, really good first half. Lots of information. We're going to take a short 15-minute break. So let's be back online at 10:25. Don't go anywhere. We've got the second half coming up. See you soon. All right, everyone, welcome back. We're going to resume. We're going to get right into it. I am very excited about the second half. First of all, just thank you for attending. Like, this was the first ever Vaughan virtual real estate summit in Vaughan. We're very, very open to receiving some feedback from you guys. So if there's anything you'd like to see for the next one, or you have some questions, what was missing, or even, we always like our praises. We like when we do a good job. And I want to thank the city of Vaughan. I want to thank the Vaughan Chamber for obviously having us and putting this event together. I know what it's like to put events together, and obviously COVID has presented its own challenges, but you're still committing to our learning, and we're very happy about that. So thank you, audience members. Please let us know what we can do for next year and what you'd like to see. So without further ado, we are gonna welcome the panelists for an in-depth conversation on construction and debt financing within the real estate market. We all know these individuals. I personally know them. And joining us today are Mary Grace Tatangelo and Michelle Durant. So a little bit about the speakers. Mary Grace is a resident of Vaughan and is a mortgage agent with Pillrock Mortgages, the Mortgage Center. Mary Grace's professional career has included an array of customer service senior roles. She joined the banking industry in 2008 as a mortgage specialist with one of the largest institutions in Canada. She moved to the Mortgage Center brand in 2012 as a mortgage agent. Mary Grace is dedicated to improving the mortgage industry by providing education-based financial advice, and she empowers her clients to make informed decisions about their mortgage and finances. Michelle is the president and principal broker of Mortgage Alliance Commercial Canada, as well as the co-founder of Multiprix Commercial. Both entities serve commercial mortgage broker needs for clients across Canada. Michelle has been in the commercial mortgage lending area for over 25 years, 12 of which were with major Canadian financial institutions, I should say. Michelle's vast experience in the commercial mortgage sector and his dedication to improving the reputation of the brokerage industry provides him with a unique and clear perspective on the challenges as well as the opportunities borrowers face in today's economic environment. He works tirelessly at keeping all participants in the commercial mortgage field informed of current issues affecting borrowers as well as lenders in the industry to ensure that each is able to take advantage of the current market trends. And having established preferred relationships with over 50 financial institutions and partners, Mortgage Alliance Commercial can meet the needs of all borrowers requiring commercial financing, whether those needs are secured via conventional, CMHC insured, mezzanine, bridge, equity, or venture capital facilities. So we are working on getting Michelle on. We're just working through the Zoom link, and we're gonna get right into it with my friend Mary Grace. Mary Grace, welcome. We're very happy to have you. Day 2.
Yeah, thank you for having me again today. What a great, you're doing really well as a moderator, by the way. And it's such a great event, so many great speakers today and so much great information for our city. So super excited to speak again today to our audience.
Yeah, and it's great that we're seeing the residential side. We heard a little bit about it yesterday, and we're gonna hear a little bit about the commercial side. But let's just start talking about it and kind of like recap. We spoke about it yesterday, but how has the residential mortgage, I guess, criteria landscape changed over the last year?
Well, obviously over the last year or even just this year, the lending criteria has changed. There's far more due diligence on every file. Lenders are requiring or requesting more documents. I mean, it can get overwhelming for clients because it feels like they're pretty much asking for everything except for DNA. But I just want to point out that the more information the lender has about your file and about you as a person and I mean, your credit tells a story, but your savings and everything else also, plays a vital role in lending, especially nowadays. There used to be a time where we used to be able to do mortgages with just a notice of assessment. but those days are done. It's, far more documentation is required, depending on whether you're self-employed, if you're employed, or if you're an hourly employee versus a salary employee. So lots of changes, but, I always say to all my clients, we are the first underwriters. So as a professional, we have to underwrite the file first before we actually send it to any lender. We have to know our client. We have to know the client's situation. And the more we understand our clients and the more we understand the situation they're in, the better we can present it to the institution. And that's what they want to see now. They want to see that we're mortgage professionals. So we need to underwrite the file. We need to do the first step of doing our due diligence as mortgage professionals. So
I agree. Yeah, and that's great. So Michelle, welcome. You missed my introduction about you and all that.
Sorry, it's called coming in on the fly. I apologize for my tardiness, but I promise to make up for it with some good comments and good information for everyone.
Yeah.
good morning, Michelle.
Hey, I'm fine, Mary Grace. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
And just off script, Michelle's actually he's my mentor. We work together a little bit on the construction side of things, financing, and he's truly a class act. So we're very happy to have him here. And Mary Grace kicked us off, Michelle, and the question was, how has the lending landscape changed over the past year? Can we talk a little bit about that and bringing a commercial perspective?
So yes, thank you, Matthew. On the commercial side, there's been obviously a dramatic change in how lenders underwrite the transactions. Since COVID in March, lenders have basically taken their underwriting rule book and thrown it out the window. I'll go as far as to say that lenders in March, April, and part of May, many of them stopped lending altogether on the commercial side. Even though we were coming to lenders and saying, we've got a CMHC approval for an $18 million loan, which lenders would eat up in a second. Normally, they said, sorry, we can't take that new loan. Why? Because they were overwhelmed and their staff was completely dedicated to mortgage deferrals. This is the first time in my 27-year career that in this type of situation, and through the last 27 years, we've lived through, more than half a dozen of these types of economic events. But this is the first time where borrowers felt it was okay to ask for mortgage deferrals. The government suggested it was okay, CMHC suggested it was okay, and the lenders went, whoa, what do you mean? Overwhelmed with mortgage deferrals, they actually stopped lending. When they got back to lending, they got back to a much more conservative underwriting process, which means that it takes much longer. The loan to values are generally significantly lower. And you're pulling out your hair more than you used to. Look, I've got the lack of hair to prove it. But that being said, deals are still getting done. It's more difficult. It takes more time, but deals are still getting done on the development side, on the construction side, on the multifamily side, on the office side. We just need to reset expectations for some of those borrowers.
Right. And Mary Grace, you touched on that yesterday, like rightfully so. There's a lot of uncertainty. And I agree, like it's very important for these institutions to put those measures in place so that in the event of obviously further economic slowdown, shutdowns, whatever, people losing jobs, it doesn't spiral into a bigger problem. So it seems like there's a lot of similarities between the residential and the mortgage side, just a different underwriting, I guess, for the respective fields. So, okay, this is off the script. It's not a question we have, but I want to ask you, there's been talks obviously throughout these 2 days about lower interest rates, making it feel like it's more affordable for homeowners to get a mortgage. How true is that when you're comparing it to the tougher underwriting guidelines? Like, are you seeing a lot of people that would be approved, let's say same time last year, and they're not being approved now?
No, not necessarily. I still think that, I mean, underwriting hasn't changed that much on the residential side. The only thing that's changed really is they want to make sure and ensure that you're employed, and they want to know how you were affected by COVID. So other than that, the underwriting, we've gone through many changes on the residential side since, since 2016. So it's, each year seems to get more difficult to underwrite and to get and to ask for more documentation from clients. So it hasn't really changed all that much. But as far as the interest rates are concerned, obviously the interest rates are really low, and that's what's caused this this market to just explode. I mean, a lot of students and renters downtown have left the downtown core. There's not a need. Everything is locked down in Toronto anyway. Universities have jumped online. But I mean, this is all temporary. This is all going to change. I mean, the government, Bank of Canada, announced that they're going to keep the interest rates low, relatively low, for at least 3 years. To pay back all this debt. So, I mean, what's happening now is people are looking to refinance their mortgage. They locked in at a high interest rate of 3% or 3.29 back, 2 years ago. The interest rates were climbing back then. And now they want to take advantage of this, 1.8 or 1.74. I've been doing this since 2008. And even from the last financial crisis, I've never seen fixed rates or any rates being this low. So it's crazy. But it doesn't necessarily mean that people need to jump on it, because it's all about doing the math. You have to do the math. You have to make sure that, is it worthwhile paying the penalty to negotiate a lower interest rate? So I encourage clients to work with mortgage professionals that are actually showing them the math. It has to make financial sense to pay a penalty, and will you recoup that money back in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, right? So before you jump, you need to actually inquire. But yeah, the interest rates are going to be here low for a while, so it's a good time to take advantage to buy something if you can.
You know what, Mary Grace, on the residential side, it's a little bit different than what we're seeing on the commercial side. Mm-hmm. On the commercial side, the interest rate, or the rate being charged to the borrower, always has a spread over the lender's cost of funds. So without a shadow of a doubt, the cost of funds to the lenders on commercial transactions, whether it's construction, land financing, CMHC financing, or office building financing, you start with the lender's cost of funds. The cost of funds are generally based on the Government of Canada bonds, or the Canada Mortgage Bond, mm-hmm. GOCs or CMBs. Those are historically low. So we're in a low, I'll say, interest environment. What we need to recognize on the commercial side is we're in a much higher risk environment at the same time. So albeit that the cost of funds are low, the banks are pricing in a COVID premium, mm-hmm. because they have a perceived risk that is higher. So I'm doing construction loans where in the past we'd be at prime plus 3/4 and prime plus 1. And lenders are coming back and saying, hey, you know what, in this case, we're happy to support the dynamics of the transaction, fit our underwriting, but we're going to be at prime plus 1.5. It's not a big difference, but it's there. We're seeing the same thing we're refinancing an office building. We're refinancing a strip mall. Okay, there's a perceived risk there. So the spread that the lenders are taking is somewhat higher. Mm-hmm. So on the commercial side, they're not benefiting as much in the reduction in interest rates that we're seeing in the markets, because the lenders are taking a higher spread. The only asset class that's benefited actually from the lower rates are multi-unit residential. Where we just booked a 5-year term for a client at 1.28%. I've never seen rates that low before. But it's a CMHC insured transaction So, and that transaction was more difficult and took 3 months longer than it would normally take to get done. So with certain asset classes, I should say with multi-unit residential financing and CMHC insured, the borrowers are benefiting from that reduction. But on the commercial side, every other asset class is not necessarily seeing and being able to take advantage of the lower rates.
Yeah, and we have a lot of realtors participating right now in this conference. So what can we tell them in terms of this, connecting the changing guidelines, the all these new restrictions, risk, everything we're talking about. You guys both get referrals from realtors. So what can you tell the realtors listening how to properly prepare their clients and manage their expectations when they're referring them out to you or to other mortgage professionals that they work with? What should they be doing now?
I would say engage us early on in the process. The better we understand the file from the beginning and their finances from the beginning, it adds to a smoother transaction. It's when we get the file after the fact and on the residential side, we have conditions of financing to waive in 5 days. But we're scrambling, getting all the documentation. So I really strongly encourage realtors to work with their mortgage professionals right from the start, engage them right from the start to do pre-approvals. Usually what we do on a pre-approval, well, I do anyway, is I ask for full documentation up front. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with them before they even start shopping.
Right.
Is it like that with you, Michelle?
It's exactly the same thing. If there's one thing that I would recommend to all the realtors is to collaborate with good mortgage professionals who have a history of being successful in closing deals like the one you're looking at. And, Mary Grace is certainly one of them. I'd like to consider myself one of them. The team that we have certainly can help you out. And the key these days, and I think you said it right, Matthew, is we need to set the right expectation. Never before has it ever taken between 8 to 12 weeks for CMHC to even recognize that a file has been submitted. That's before they start underwriting. So for the mortgage, for the realtor that's hoping to close his deal in 60 days, and it's a multi-unit residential, well, you know what? We need to reset that expectation, because in the market, the purchaser won't be able to get the financing that he's looking for or waive conditions. So it's work with a good mortgage broker who will set the right expectation so that you can close your deal without everybody getting frustrated. I think the biggest challenge and the biggest grief is everybody gets frustrated because they're trying to run to a finish line that's not set in time correctly.
Yeah.
Hey, we're trying to do a closing in 60 days, waive conditions in 30. But on a multi-unit residential property, you can't waive conditions in 60. You're going to need 90.
Yeah. I think our jobs as professionals, be it being mortgage or real estate, is the whole process for a client should be a happy one. Whether they're buying a house that's, their first time home buyers or whatever, the entire process needs to be seamless for them. And I think it's like the same with you, Michelle. That's why it's important that, real estate agents, mortgage brokers have that strong relationship, that they can be open and honest with one another, with the client involved as well. Because when the clients are engaged throughout the process and they see their mortgage and real estate professional working for them, it just makes the whole purchase a more a happier purchase for them. And that's how we get our referrals, right? So we want to limit the amount of stress that our clients go through as much as possible.
That the clients go through, Mary Grace, and that every person that needs to collaborate in the transaction. On the commercial side, you're going to need an appraisal, you're going to need an environmental, you're going to need a building condition review. Well, the good broker will set the right expectations and let everybody know right off the bat. And although I was saying it'll take, maybe 90 days to get an approval these days for CMHC, there are options. If you want to close quicker, or if you need to close quicker, we have options for you and we'll bridge that gap. But there's expectations that need to be, addressed with the borrower and the vendor to say, if we bridge it, here's how we need to do it. Are you okay with that? And then we'll fall back on the right position, which is the CMHC position. And it's the same thing for land loans and construction facilities. It's just taking longer to get to the same finish line.
Yeah, but don't you agree, Michelle, if we're brought in from the beginning, and having knowledge of the file from the start, it really does help for an easier transition or smoother transition for everybody involved, right?
100%, Mary Grace. The sooner we get in or we're involved in the transaction, the sooner we can keep everybody happy and make sure that it's going to close. And the sooner we can call the shot. If this is not going to happen, we'll do a quick analysis right off the bat saying, oh, you know what? The borrower was hoping to put $200,000 down, but he needs to put 275. Let's let him know right away that instead of buying this property, maybe he should consider a smaller property. If there's going to be challenges, will I identify them right away so we can conclude on it, or have the purchaser, bring to the table what he needs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just to build on what you're both saying, gone are the days of, hey, here's an offer, conditional for 5 business days. What can we do? It's like, you should be going in there. You should, before going into an offer, you should already know where you stand.
For sure.
I so echo that. I can't believe how many professionals are still putting their clients in jeopardy by doing that. And especially in the residential side, which is where we focus on. We're seeing bidding wars in almost every market. You cannot afford to go in conditional on 5 business days, and then in 5 business days, you're bidding with other people, and then you finally secure the deal, and then you're hoping you get approved. You got to go in knowing what you're able to handle, so that way you can determine if this is right for you, because with bidding wars, we're seeing prices go up, right? And I'm building on that, and there are some questions coming in from our audience that we can start asking. So David is asking, sorry, I just read it. Yeah, we'll post this, David. He wants both of your information, so if you don't mind just posting it in the chat, that would be great. And Amelia is asking the same thing. So we will post both of your informations in our chat. So with respects to going forward post-COVID, do you anticipate that some of these changes are going to remain, or do you think that lenders will start to loosen up?
I'm going to say no. And I don't think they're going to loosen up. I mean, we've been hoping that they were going to loosen up from when they implemented the stress test. But, and I did see before COVID, they were going to make some changes to the stress test. I mean, I am part of the Mortgage Brokers Professional Association, and, they've made great strides with the government to make these changes. But once COVID hit, that was all put on hold. So hopefully, I would say maybe in 3 years, when we get out of this mess and our economy is stronger, they may look at that again. But I can't see them lightening up underwriting anytime soon. I think it's going to be here to stay.
I echo that, Mary Grace. On the commercial side, it's the same thing. The lenders have loosened up to their grinding halt that they had come to in March, April, and May.
Yeah.
But they're nowhere near where they were a year ago. So every loan application has a COVID element to it that is only going to be there for the next, well, hopefully no more than the next 12 months by the time a vaccine is produced and the vaccine is made available, and we can get back to some sense of normal economy. It's not going to happen anytime soon. So again, it's more important for everybody, the realtors, the developers, the promoters, the borrowers, to work closely with the professionals in the industry, to pick the right professionals in the industry, to set the right expectations, and make sure that the process for their transaction is as smooth as possible, understanding that smooth today and timely today is way different than what it was 6 months ago.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of studies are coming out and saying people are more efficient working from home and all that, but it seems like there's a lot of overwhelm. Yeah, like it's weird. I don't know, maybe not in our industries, but or at least in the lender landscape. Miguel is asking, this is a good question. What do you foresee for future inflation and the response that banks may have to similar to the 1980s style of inflation? Like, I think maybe where he's getting at is, do we see probably higher interest rates in the future? Maybe, yeah.
I definitely interest rates are gonna increase. I mean, they tried to do that a few years ago. I mean, I do believe I think it was like maybe 2 years ago, it went up to 3.94 again, the 5-year fixed rate. So, you know, keep in mind, the 80s, the loans were much smaller than they are today. The average home mortgage here in Vaughan is $500,000. So, I mean, we need to, the banks have to keep that into consideration as well. So when your mortgage comes up for renewal in 5 years, you know, people don't realize that your interest rate today is 1.90, but in 5 years, it could be 3%. Yes, your amortization now is maybe 21 years or 17 years. But when you renegotiating the interest rate in 5 years, your monthly payments are going to jump, and they're going to jump much higher than the 1.9 that you're paying. So what happens usually is they have to go back to their 30-year amortization just to keep their interest rate, the monthly payment low. So that's what, you know, yes, the interest rates are going to go high. I do not think they're going to be anywhere close to the 80s where they were 18-20%. The mortgage loans are completely different sizes now. Michelle, what about you?
On my end, I expect that the government in the short term can't afford to have the economy affected by significant inflation. So it's going to do everything it can in the short term to keep the interest rates low and keep the economy going. The government's assistance programs throughout the country with COVID have, you know, pumped a lot of money into the country to sort of cushion the effect of COVID and to avoid some inflationary situations that would otherwise be there. So I think in the short term, next 12 to 18 months, it's going to be stable. In the long term, well, there's absolutely no doubt that the rates are going to go up because they're so low, they can't go any lower than they are today. When you're at the bottom of the barrel, there's only one way to go, is up. So they have to come up at one point. And that point being, if you're looking 12 to 18 months down the line, it's very unlikely to happen. After that, in 2 years, 3 years, it should normally start creeping up.
Yeah, and I believe we have time for one more question. And what I want to connect it back to is when we were talking about mortgage deferrals. I don't know if that is something that exists on the commercial side as much, Michelle, but how important was, you know, during COVID-19, so many things changed. How important is it that for lenders, for insurers going forward, to really like place a focus on education and educating Canadians on what all this stuff means? Because really, it's like, okay, hey, we encourage you to do a mortgage deferral, and then it falls on Mary Grace and it falls on you and to go explain to clients, what does that even mean and how does that impact you? So how important do you think it is going forward for the lenders and for the insurers to really, really put the spotlight on educating borrowers?
I'll jump in first here, because I think that the whole concept of mortgage deferrals had the borrowers trying to suck and blow at the same time. because there was a perception in the market that it was okay, and the government was saying, don't worry, we'll support you. And CMHC is saying, don't worry, we're giving the lenders the ability to accept mortgage deferrals. But I'll get back to the suck and blow comment. You can't call your lender and say, I need a deferral, and expect that the lender is going to say, oh, you remain a good credit. When you say, I need a deferral, you're saying, I can't meet my obligations that I had, contractually, signed off on with you. I had several transactions, or we had several transactions where as soon as the lender saw that the borrower had a request to defer some mortgages, even if they didn't need it, but they felt, hey, it's okay to ask, everybody's asking, because they asked for a deferral, the lenders turned down their new request to finance. Because if you're asking for a referral, it's because you're having trouble meeting your obligations. How can you expect that lender or any lender to say, well, fine, you have a new request on another project, we're comfortable financing you? Well, no. So there was a disconnect in the market, which I think has been corrected in the markets, where most people understand now that a mortgage deferral doesn't mean free money, and it's not okay. There's consequences to it.
Yeah, Mary Grace, same question.
So I mean, I think initially when that first happened, I think the government did the right thing. I think CMHC, the government, the banks, I think everything, deferring people's payments, like the whole program was the right thing for them to do. We've never been through this before. So they're all flying by the seat of their pants, and they're just trying to figure things out. So at the time, people didn't know if they were going to have jobs. So they were already adding a buffer just in case. So I think what happened initially, just from my conversations with my clients, is yes, some people did initially panic and asked for the deferral, even though they were still employed, because they were preempting that they were going to lose their job and they were worried. So I think what happened was after 2-3 months, people started getting comfortable with, okay, I'm working from home now. My employer's not laying me off. Employers have been amazing communicating with their employees and trying to keep them employed. So I think once that everybody figured out what was happening, then people started, removing those deferrals. But, you're right, Michelle, the volumes were crazy. The lenders could not keep up. Lenders were not lending. They were just answering mortgage deferral calls for the first 2 months. But now it's changed. And the number one question that they are asking still is, how did COVID-19 impact your income? They want to know. So whether you were laid off or whether you were returned back to work, it's okay. It does come on your credit bureau. If you have deferred your mortgage payment, it will come up as a natural disaster. It's labeled as a natural disaster. It does not impact you, meaning that it doesn't affect your credit. However, lenders do want to know how long you did take advantage of the deferral program and what was the situation. That's all.
So I think what I'm hearing is the story now that the broker is presenting to the lender has to be really, really bulletproof. Like, it needs to be very solid in this landscape, and the story of everything, the credit, the income, the project, the stability, rents, whatever the case may be, has to be very, very solid. And again, it ties in very nicely with any realtors listening. Prepare your clients, manage the expectation, and it's not as simple as it may have been. Michelle, you said it perfectly when you said it's just taking a little longer to get to the same finish line. So I agree, and I echo those comments. Do you want to leave our audience with any last words, any key takeaways going forward?
Go ahead, Michelle, I'll give you the floor first.
On my end, to the entire audience listening out there, I've been doing this for 27 years, have seen more than half a dozen similar events in the economy. and tomorrow has come and has been better. We're all going to get through this. In the interim, we just need to adjust how we address the loan requests, how we address the situation, and the lenders are only looking for a little bit of clarity on how it's affected. So don't give up. We're all gonna get through this, and there are better days lying ahead. Whatever you need, the lenders are there to support you, and good brokers like Mary Grace and myself will be here to hold your hand and guide you through it.
100%. I echo what Michelle says. For the audience, like lenders look at who the submission broker is. I mean, if the submission broker has a reputation of presenting a accurate file with, knowing their client and providing the documentation up front for the lender to make that decision, that's who you want to work with. We have a reputation in the business, and that goes a long way with a lender, especially when a lender needs to make a decision whether they want to proceed with the file or not, or increase or lower the loan to value. We have that leverage that we can convince the lender in some cases, right, Michelle?
You know what? I echo that sentiment 100%. What happens essentially is the lender is going to be happier and more comfortable dealing with Mary Grace's client, because the lender knows that should something ever happen, Mary Grace won't let them down. The lender can call Mary Grace and say, hey, you know what? The situation has changed with this lender 2 years later or whatever. Can you help us get him out of this jam? And Mary Grace will be able to do that. The lenders respect the credibility of the brokers they're dealing with to facilitate the transaction 100%.
Yeah. And I just want to add one thing. And I'm sure, Michelle, you're the same as me. I get calls from all different realtors, clients, friends, and I welcome those calls. Like I may not be able to answer all my calls at one time during the day because we're really, really busy, but ask questions. Like, we're mortgage professionals and we're lending professionals. So we know the criteria and what the lender is looking for. We could educate clients and prepare clients ahead of time before they're even considering putting an offer in or looking for a property. And that's big, and that's key. And being a real estate agent like Matthew, I'm sure that when your clients are pre-approved and they've done their extensive work with a mortgage professional, it just makes your life a lot easier too. When you're going in and you have to waive conditions of financing, you're confident you can have that conversation with the mortgage broker and the client, say, okay, are we good? Do I have any reason to be alarmed if we waive the conditions of financing?
Yeah, quite frankly, we don't even want the client to walk or run before they can crawl. Like, we want to know where you stand financially. It just makes sense from a process standpoint, right? So, and obviously a risk standpoint. So I agree. I agree with both of what you're saying. And on behalf of the city, I'm being cued. We're wrapping up. On behalf of the city, you guys were both awesome. Thank you. The Vaughan Chamber thanks you. I'm sure all of our audience members thank you. And have a great weekend. I hope to see you both very soon.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice weekend.
All right. So we hope you enjoyed that. I know I did. And we're almost at the end, but we wanted to finish this conference with a bang. So at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce our closing speaker for the conference, Vivian Reese, a leader in Vaughan's business community. Inspired by her vision of becoming a successful female entrepreneur, Vivian Reese founded Your Community Realty and grew it to be one of Canada's #1 real estate franchise companies. Leading by example with her people-first approach, Vivian nurtured and grew her brokerage from a small business to a market-dominating powerhouse. Today, Vivian is an author of her latest book, Yes, You Can, where she shares encompassing motherhood. I'm in the middle of your intro. Encompassing motherhood in a highly competitive real estate world with honesty, humor, and courage. In addition to running her successful brokerage business, being a speaker, and writing a book, Vivian dedicates her time, energy, and resources to helping over 30 plus charities and causes each year and inspiring others to reach their potential. Over the years, Vivian has been honored with several industry-related awards, including the prestigious Vaughan Chamber of Commerce Philanthropic Business Person of the Year Award in 2012, the Order of Vaughan Award in 2016, the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce Women of Excellence Award in 2018. Vivian stands behind her brand promise, people come first, and it shows. Day 2, Vivian, welcome back. We're so glad to have you close off the show for us. Thank you.
Amazing. Good morning, Matthew. Hi, good to see you again.
Likewise.
And good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. And closing out today, wow, that doesn't put enough pressure on me. I don't know, but it's great. It's going to be fun, actually. We've got lots of good stuff to talk about. Just want to tell you a little bit about myself, besides all of that, how I got into real estate. Real estate is such an amazing industry, and it's been amazing for myself and a lot of people that are on today that are watching. In one way or another, we've all been affected by real estate. But my beginnings in real estate started really when I was very young. My father, we would talk about real estate at the dinner table. And I was very intrigued by the real estate business. So what I did is at the earliest chance I got that was allowing me to get my license, I got my real estate license at the age of 18. It was a different world back then, for sure. As a matter of fact, around that time, Vaughan, where we are at right now, was a farm. There's very little going on in Vaughan. It was a lot of green space. There was nothing that you see today. So Vaughan was very bare, very interesting place to be in. But I was there watching Vaughan grow. So it's a very interesting journey for me to share with you. And as a matter of fact, the township of Vaughan became the town of Vaughan with the village of Woodbridge that was incorporated. And it was around 1972, 73 time. So now I'm dating myself. But they opened up a pool, which was used for a movie. I bet you didn't know that. And the movie was it was an underground adventure called The Neptune Factor. The movie told the story of the advanced marine that was sent to rescue underwater ocean lab that had been lost in an earthquake. Pretty interesting. So Vaughan made history even before it became the city north of Toronto. And it's very exciting to see what's going on in Vaughan. And I'm here today to share with you my insight and my experience because I do this every day on how COVID-19 has affected the real estate industry and where we see the real estate industry going from here. So what I'm going to do is share with you a screen. And I've got Marty here helping me because I can't do this on my own. There you go. So Marty's going to help me with the screen.
Perfect. We can see that. Thank you.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Okay. So prior to the pandemic, the Canadians, we stayed between 2 and 3% of disposable income. And that jumped tremendously to 28.2%. Believe it or not, people saved money during COVID-19. Why? Well, they weren't able to spend. We mentioned this yesterday. They didn't have anywhere to spend it. They were confined to their homes, and they decided that what they were going to do is, we call it the 3 Ps, puppies, Pelotons, and properties. That's where people started spending their dollars. And because the regular forms of entertainment weren't around, people have found many ways to spend money in their homes. And they wanted to improve their lifestyle. They started looking around their living conditions. They said, this isn't good enough. Maybe we should make improvements. Maybe we should move. They had the extra cash, so they wanted to invest it in the space that they were spending a lot of time in. Upgrading their houses. They weren't necessarily buying, but they were upgrading, a combination of the two. If it was renovations, that would increase the Canadian housing stock. So that was, again, putting money into real estate. And if you pile $20 billion worth of renos into our housing across the country, of course, the value of the houses would be rising because of the improvements. And then there's a bigger and better picture here. we did some research, as you can see over here in the summer. The top one at the very top graph is the society savings rate, as you can see. Okay, and the bottom graph shows all the things that people were cutting back on. And if you notice, the last one is the least that they were cutting back on is housing, real estate. They weren't cutting back on that. Everything else but that. The second page here I'm going to show you is the graph here shows residential market balancing. Okay, the red line, you can see it's pretty sharp. It's the red line is the sales to listing ratio. The blue line is inventory. Okay, and now you look at what happened during the second quarter. If you notice on that graph, it spikes way up there for 1 month. Okay, now we are now in the worst inventory situation we've been in 20 years. The worst. Hard to believe, but we have a shortage of houses. Okay, the demand is dramatically higher than the supply. And part of the problem was that we never fixed the supply issue coming into the pandemic. Who knew? Who knew we were heading into a pandemic? Nobody knew. So this is what the results are right now. Okay, so the supply shortage in Toronto and the GTA coming into this thing, we didn't have enough housing at the beginning of the year. If you recall, January, February, there was multiple offers. People were getting into competitive situations. And then all of a sudden, boom, COVID hit. So we were in a shortage back then. Then suddenly we had this surge in demand, which accelerated the issue. And as you can see on the comments on the side there, Sean Cathcart, the new chief economist of the Canadian Real Estate Association, he makes a comment here and he says, suddenly the home is under a microscope. And people are saying, if there's anything I'm going to spend money on, it's where I live. Okay, so that's it. People were really using their home for more than just a home. It's a school, it's a gym, it's more. Home became everything. It shows up in renovations and people upgrading their houses to bigger homes, backyards. Backyards all of a sudden became their new vacation location, okay? And people were living, that were living home with their parents. Well, they realized that confined in these four walls with mom and dad was very stressful. So guess what? Mom and dad paid first and last month rent and said, bye-bye, go rent somewhere, because the confinement was getting to people. So there's these changes that are taking place in the household. But again, everybody's in a home, in a condo, whatever that is, it's confinement. Very interesting times because no one really was prepared for this. So people adapted, which is very, very encouraging to see. Cottage country, that became the new place to be because, you know, people weren't traveling to Europe. They weren't traveling to the, you know, their other vacation destinations. So cottage countries became a very hot commodity. Rentals were going skyrocketing. I mean, you couldn't find one if you didn't know someone. It was a very difficult time for someone to try and get a cottage if they hadn't pre-planned it earlier. And so if you think about cottage country not being on the market during the beginning of the year because of COVID, then all of a sudden, as soon as the people started traveling to the cottages, that market got really, really hot. It actually was, they did a 4-month sales frenzy in over projected 12 months. So that market broke records. Prices are skyrocketing in cottage country. I see it all the time, and there's a shortage in that area as well. So then you look at the next slide. Okay, this one over here is pretty cool. As you can see, so you look at this slide, and this is home sales over the year September. For September to September, year over year. And it really shows you how amazing the market has been. Look at Toronto, okay? Right across Canada for that matter, but Toronto, we're looking pretty good. 41.6% up over last year, September to September. And if you recall during the shutdown, we were down 65% in transactions. I know because I was checking the numbers daily, 65%. People were fearing, will we ever get back? What will happen? And look what happened. And very interesting. Nobody expected that. It's very encouraging. The next slide. Okay, this is a really interesting slide too. This chart it is in the upper right. It shows you the MLS condo inventory, the one at the upper right. And in 2020, it started with a low inventory. Okay, in 2020 when we opened, but the crisis level January, February, and now it's ending with the record high level of inventory. There's 4 major things here that affected this particular market, the condo market. And a lot of it's the completion of other projects that had started prior. So, you know, these projects take years to complete. Well, all these projects that were taking years to complete now got completed. People that bought them for assignments, people that bought them to rent them. Now, all of a sudden, this inventory is on the market. And then there's a lot of new projects that were being launched at the same time. So you've got this flood of inventory hitting the market. And what affected this was, okay, so the rental inventory was affected because the students, they all went home. COVID hit, students went home, they never came back. So they were doing all their courses online because the borders were closed. And that really affects this market in particular, especially with the investors that had these condos rented or had leases signed up. All of a sudden, everything was basically avoided on those units. If you look at the gray line at the bottom, 830 students were in Canada. Okay, Canada is number 3 in the world for students to come to for education. First it's the US, then it's the UK, and then it's Canada. They contribute over $21 billion to our economy. That's huge. That's an important part of how that affected that real estate market, okay? They closed the borders and now these students are gonna start coming back. They will start coming back. The lower chart you can see in the bottom, okay, is the blue bar is our target and the red bar is our actual, okay? Pretty interesting. What you see here is 2019, we had 230 immigrants. We lost approximately 100,000 immigrants coming into Canada, into the GTA, which is popular destination for a lot of immigrants. The new Canadians tend to not purchase the first 3 years, so they rent. Okay, that really affected our market and in general. So this wave of people that could have been renting condos and from the investors, that all disappeared. So we were short on that level as well as the students and boarders. So, and then the last one is the Airbnb market, which is the short-term rentals. Well, Toronto's it's huge as far as tourism goes to North Americans. The borders were closed. The Americans, which are big visitors to Canada, that market disappeared too. So the Airbnb market was flat, completely flattened. If you add all of this up, you get the spike in inventory, and that's what you see on this graph. Okay, now that's going to change, right? It's going to be great because the federal government has said they're going to change that to help the economy. So what they're going to do, the federal government's going to be welcoming 400,000 plus immigrants this year over the next 3 years into Canada. That's huge. That's 1.2 million new immigrants into Canada. That's going to be a huge influx into our economy. And guess what? These people need houses. They need roofs over their heads. Now, it's a known fact that they don't buy right away. They rent. They usually rent for about 3 years before they purchase. So that's going to really make a difference in our rental factor of numbers, okay? And these foreign, and then also the foreign students are going to start coming back. Of course, they're going to be quarantined for the 2 weeks, no different than if you and I are going to travel south or to Europe. If we choose to, well, there's checks and balances in place. You quarantine, but they're going to start coming back. Slowly but surely, they will start coming back. And so I really do believe that we're going to be seeing a softening, obviously, in the GTA until all of that happens, because that's going to take time. It just doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take time. And I believe it's going to happen probably, it's going to be a softening of the market into the spring of 2021. That condo market's going to be soft until that catches up. Okay? But it will catch up. So these numbers will start to pick up and progress slowly, but they have a lot of different things that they're working on, the students, the boarders, and the immigrants. That'll play a huge impact on our numbers for sure. Okay, next graph. Okay, we talked about that, and I heard the mortgage specialist talking about this. Very interesting is what happens when people have to start paying back their mortgages again. Okay, well, that has actually already happened. It's already started, and the deferral program, it's over. It's been over for a while for most people, and people have already started making those payments. That's this chart over here. Okay, the one that on the upper corner, the blue line, that's the states. Look at how high they spike. That's not good. The red one is Canada. We're good. We're good. Now this shows the delinquency of foreclosures where people can't live up to their commitments, and that's what you can see here. And you'll see the US is really on the high side. Their defaults are very high and a lot of foreclosures taking place. And remember that stress test that we were all upset about in 2018? Who knew? Well, that was done by the government because they felt the rates were going to go up. Well, that didn't happen. Obviously, COVID changed their mindset on that. And so that they wanted to make sure people could afford their housing. Well, this is why this is looking good for Canadians. And it turned out to be a good thing for Canada. Well, in turn, we're doing really well from what we can see here. And the green line on the bottom over here, the bottom graph is Toronto. It's still very low, and it's the lowest delinquency rate of all the big cities in Canada. Torontonians are doing very well. You can see there's Canada, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. Toronto is the green line. Looking good. Okay. So 88% of new mortgages sold or approved in 2020. After COVID, they had credit scores of 700 or higher, and that's pretty manageable. So they did well. They did well. These checks and balances really helped a lot. I know it was hard, but the results speak for themselves. Okay, the last graph, we can go on to that. Next page. Okay, the last chart is just our forecast for 2020. You can see the GTA. We think that the year will end up by December 31st. Home prices will have risen 8.5% over 2019. You can see the graph is right in there. And that's pretty remarkable when they were not forecasting this during COVID. They had no forecast at all of anything close to this. And as you can see, the global crisis, everyone was suffering, but they were estimating, if you look at what the average would have been, even before COVID, the average was 5%. Well, we've exceeded that. It's at 8.5%. Pretty fantastic. Yeah. First-time home buyers are going to be they're going to want to buy something. That's what happened, and which means that people that own their entry-level housing are going to be looking at moving up. So it's a cycle. First-time buyers come in, then the rest of the people start looking at buying something bigger. They're going from a condo to a townhouse. People start having children from 1 to 2, and the cycle starts from there. And it's good. It's a positive thing, and you can see it right here. The results speak for themselves. So the forecast, well, numbers speak for themselves. The forecast looks good. If anything, and I don't want to sound like I'm a cheerleader, but I think it looks great. It really looks great for real estate. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivian. That was very, very informative, impactful, and I echo your comments. Very positive outlook for the future, and it's really been a tough year. I was connecting with someone today that I hadn't connected with for a long time. I said, how are you and the family doing? And he's like, come by, family's doing good. Come by, let's go for a walk. It's even for morale, right? And so the positivity that we've been hearing from all the speakers over the last day and two, it's been good. It's been very encouraging. So I'm really excited. And like you said, I'm a numbers person too. Numbers don't lie. So,
They don't lie.
yeah. So we do have some questions coming in, as well as questions we want to ask. So let's get right into it. So I'm sorry, I don't want to butcher your name, but I think it's Surreal. Thank you, she's saying, or he's saying, thank you for bringing up the student housing investment market for discussion. What do you foresee being the trend for the upcoming year in this product segment? So student housing.
As I mentioned, students are going to start coming back. All right. They are going to become, as I mentioned, we're the three top in the world of destinations for students to come to for education. Canada's one, UK and US, we're on the top three. So we are going to see students coming back. Yes, I know that they're working remotely, but don't forget, a lot of these students come here to also get into Canada as new immigrants. And that's really the goal of their future. That's what they're most of them are heading in that direction. So that market will definitely start picking up. We're going to start seeing a lot of foreign students migrating way back in. And again, that's going to work its way through. It's going to be a slow process, okay, because you've got to have a few other things happening in between. You've got the students, you've got the borders, you've got the Airbnb, you've got all of that. That's going to be paying a big part of that influx, but that is going to definitely take place. It'll probably filter its way through, I would say, to through the summer of 2021. By fall of 2021, we should be in a better place. God willing, we have the COVID-19, they have the vaccine out, things are looking better right across the border, all over the world, and we will be seeing that go back to normal.
I agree, and might I add, tuition has not come down for these virtual. So the schools are not going anywhere. They've removed the capacity limits. Normally there was a limit of how many students can enroll in a particular course. Obviously with the emergence of Zoom and all that, it's gotten rid of that, and tuition has not come down. So schools are not going anywhere. It's just a matter of time over when these restrictions are lifted, and obviously a vaccine comes out and people feel more comfortable to get back together.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I know you work with a lot of developers, big developers as well. So how can realtors, speaking to the realtors here and the developers, capitalize on the current market trends? So I know we heard a lot from city officials. There's a lot of changes coming in the city of Vaughan, and how can they capitalize right now based on these trends?
Well, I think, people just have to look at what's going on around them. And I think, the city of Vaughan has so much to offer. So much. I mean, you can actually see what building permits are being submitted, what site plans are being approved. And I think, realtors should be looking at those stats. They should be looking at where the trends are going, and they should be, starting to build their database of clients. Clients are always going to buy. They want to buy either to live in or as investors. So there's all kinds of moving parts here. And I think that if, people are really interested in their business, there's just so much opportunity. So much opportunity. I mean, we're living in a place where, people want to live here. I mean, people across the border want to live here. Everybody wants to be here. We have it all here. It's a matter of what we do with it. So my thing is always get off your rear end and get to work. Okay. Call your people, get out there and know what's going on. Understand the market. Don't wait for it to come to you. Go out and do your research. We have so much research available to us at our fingertips. Knowledge is power. The more you know how to work with your clients, the more you know how to present this to your clients. And that's really what it's all about. It's the knowledge and sharing it with your clients.
Yeah, and you mentioned that yesterday, right? Just becoming more valuable and to your clients. And
yeah,
the opportunities are endless. Like if you start chasing more than one opportunity, I feel like you won't catch either. Like the old Confucius said it, the man who chases two rabbits catches neither. But there are so many opportunities, so you just have to go for it, right?
And and I think people they get so confused about, oh, this is happening, that's happening. Focus on something and become a professional at that. You can't do it all. You can't be a pro at everything. So pick something that you really like and focus on that. Whether it's land assembly, or whether it's detached homes, or whether it's condo, whatever that is. And even for developers, you focus on, what do you specialize in? Do you cater to first time buyers? What do you cater to? If you focus on something and you service that customer, you will become known for that. People will migrate to you. They will be calling you for that, because you become that known person, that known company that services that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I totally echo those comments. So Jack is asking, can you see that the employers in the city of Toronto would want the employees to come back to the office? And will the cost be out of their reach in a year or so compared to the value of their homes that are in rural areas? So basically, I think what he's asking is, do we see the Toronto market just booming in a year or so?
Toronto's Toronto, guys. You know, you've got one of the, where I think the Toronto real estate is still underpriced compared to any big city in the world. Okay, I've traveled, I've gone to, real estate conventions in across the, in China, and we've been compared to all of the other big cities in the world, and our real estate is very low. Our real estate's very affordable, and we're a very sophisticated city. So Toronto will always be a booming city. Always. This is a temporary hiccup, trust me. And the smarter people, they're going to be buying when it's low. That's what's going to happen here. You wait and see. They're all looking for those, the stress sales, because people are losing, they get afraid, they lose confidence. Don't fall for that. Toronto is always going to be a hot commodity.
Yeah, and there was a stat the other day that I read where Toronto is the fastest growing city in all of North America, not just Canada.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? And we're still short of supply, like you said. Who would have thought? And now the immigration over the next 3 years. Everyone needs a place to live. Everyone needs a place to live.
Absolutely.
We do have time for one more question, Vivian. So
Okay.
what do you think, based on your experience, what do you think are the long-term implications for real estate as a result of the changes in consumer preferences and behavior that have emerged as a result of COVID-19?
I think it's positive. I really do. I always look at things as being, okay, this is a change. This is new. People they have more options. That's the change. They have more options. They have more options. They can actually, look at a house on their phone. They can do, pre-inspections because of virtual tours right from the comfort of their home. But still, they will always get in their car and drive to the home that they're going to buy.
Yeah.
They will always do that because that is the biggest investment of their life, and they're not going to chance that by a click of a button without inspecting that property. So what it is people have options. They can just navigate quicker, but nothing really has changed. They still want to go out there. They still want to look at the house. They still want to look at the real estate because that's what they like to do, and that will never change.
Yeah, I agree. And any last words, any last comments? I've really enjoyed our time together these last couple of days. It's been fun.
It's been great. It's been great. I just say to everybody that's here today, kudos to you for wanting to better yourselves, to better your skills, to listen to the experts, and to be interested in what's happening in our marketplace, and to be part of that. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, when I got into real estate, Vaughan was farmland. There was nothing here, and watching it the way it is today, and I can't wait to see what the next 20 some odd years plus will be. And here we all are in it together. So let's be part of it, and let's embrace it, and let's enjoy the fruits of the beautiful place that we work and live in.
Well said, Vivian. Thank you so much for your time, for being
Pleasure.
here with us. On behalf of the City of Vaughan and the Vaughan Chamber, thank you. You did an awesome job as always.
Matthew, thank you. As always, you do an awesome job. Thanks you to the City of Vaughan as well, and the Chamber of Commerce. You guys are amazing. Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Bye, everyone.
All right, that was awesome. That was fantastic. I enjoyed it. I'm pumped. I don't know. I'm pumped going into the weekend. I might have to make some calls on my birthday and talk to some clients, but we're going to wrap up here, folks. It's been an absolute pleasure, an absolute honor. It was my first time emceeing an event, so I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it went smoothly for you. I hope that you learned and gained a lot of knowledge, as much knowledge that I've learned. Like, I have so many pages of notes here. And we're looking forward to next year, where it's going to be bigger and better than ever. And again, hopefully I can see a lot of you next week at the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce Business Achievement Awards. I'm going to now turn it over to Brian Schiffman, my friend and the president and CEO of the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce, for closing remarks. Have a great weekend, everyone. And Brian, over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Matthew. Well, first of all, that segment with Vivian was fantastic. I like the comment, the last comment in the chat, that Vivian's that person's role model. I think a lot of people share that view, and appreciate the optimistic standpoint and enthusiasm. So Matthew, let's talk about you. You were a phenomenal MC, great moderator. The success of this, go ahead, yeah.
So I'll come back to the screen.
Well, we'll have you back for your next birthday. If
Awesome.
not sooner. If not sooner.
I'm in. Thank you.
Well, you know, the success of the conference, the positive feedback we received is in no small part to you emceeing. It's just really great energy, astute questions. I appreciate the levity that you brought in throughout the 2-day conference. And of course, again, happy birthday. And like I said, we'll have you back, I'm sure, before that. On behalf of the Vaughan Chamber and our partners at the City of Vaughan, they want to thank you as well. So Matthew, that was great. Now, my final comments, I think the conference has been nothing short of exciting. We've heard from some phenomenal speakers and panelists about the real estate market as it was prior to COVID, where we are now, and based on current trends, what the post-COVID landscape could look like. We're fortunate to live in a city that's ripe with growth opportunities, and the Vaughan Chamber has been so pleased to partner with the City of Vaughan in providing this virtual real estate forum to discuss Vaughan's thriving real estate market. We've had the opportunity to hear about the boom industrial real estate is experiencing due to the rise of e-commerce, the potential opportunities and implications of work from home culture, and the development that's fueled in suburban markets. We also had the chance to preview the city's new vacant land directory, which I'm sure will have significant benefits for attracting development in Vaughan. I'd like to thank our sponsors for helping to make today's event happen. I acknowledged Vivian a moment ago, but presenting sponsor Vivian Reese, your Community Realty, Royal LePage. Vivian's always there with the Chamber, just great person to speak to. Keynote sponsor, the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. I thought Lisa and Jason did a great job earlier. And I enjoyed hearing from Michelle as well, community sponsor, Mortgage Alliance Commercial. Thank you for that. And I wanted to thank you all for being here in attendance today. You know, I was so impressed to learn there were nearly 400 people who joined us over our 2-day conference. And I hope you'll continue to stay engaged with our activities and programs moving forward. I encourage you to join us next Wednesday, November 18th for the Business Achievement Awards. We'll celebrate business excellence together, and we've already sold over 450 tickets. And December 1st with Mark Falbo, the CEO, for the CEO Speaker Series. Mark is the president and CEO of Mircom and the chair of the Mackenzie Health Cortellucci Hospital. The event takes the form of a fireside chat, which is free to members, very affordable for non-members. Matthew, you'd love that one, so you should definitely join us there. You'll be great in the Q&A. And thank you to the Vaughan Chamber and the City of Vaughan teams for bringing this event together. For all of you watching from home or your office, you've been an amazing audience, very engaged throughout the conference, so many comments in the chat. I look forward to seeing you all at our next event, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Thank you.